Caroline Kalevi, who is CEO of YMCA Lincolnshire, to do the welcome. Caroline, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Caroline Kalevi. I'm from YMCA Lincolnshire, and we host the TED Ageing Better team at YMCA Lincolnshire, having merged with Community Links about 16 months ago. So welcome to the TED Ageing Better in East Lindsey Learning event in 2021. Most of you will be aware that today marks the 1-year anniversary of the beginning of lockdown. The pandemic has impacted all of our lives in ways we could never have even imagined, but it is encouraging to see signs that we may be able to return to some semblance of normality very soon. As we were here today, for some people in later life, the pandemic presented extreme challenges and a restriction of freedom and self-determination that tested even the most resilient in our society. Older people have been othered and mothered, and ageism in all its forms has presented itself, either through misinformation or genuine ignorance. It has been all too easy to cast all categories of people in later life as vulnerable and frail, whilst the majority would regard themselves as fiercely independent and capable. For many, frail or not, lockdown has resulted in a total loss of freedom, and for some, the social life they had built around them dissolved in a heartbeat. This gave me cause to think about what freedom actually means in older life. And for me, who turns 52 this year, freedom means having the capability, resources, skills, opportunities to live a whole life and fulfilling life, freedom to have choices and freedom to reach my potential. This is the view also held by YMCA Lincolnshire. So at YMCA Lincolnshire, we manage a range of community services, from early years nurseries, youth work, housing, supporting those with complex needs and those suffering from homelessness. And in supporting all of these people, from babies to older people, we focus on potential, growth, opportunity, strength, resilience, success and learning. And we focus on the mind and body and spirit. It's a whole life approach. So as we listen to the experts today, we should reflect on how the pandemic has restricted the ability of older people to fulfill their potential, to grow, to learn, to work, to live. And how, if we don't take actions, this could continue or worsen beyond the lifting of lockdown. I'd like to thank our specialist speakers today and the TED team who have organised the event so beautifully. As always, I'd like to pass on our thanks to the National Lottery Community Fund for its 7-year-long support of the TED programme, and to the expert delivery partners and East Lindsey District Council. Finally, in order to mark the 1-year anniversary of the lockdown today, we will be observing a national 1-minute silence at 12 o'clock in remembrance of the lives lost, and to reflect on the collective impact on us all. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Jane Adams, the Programme Manager for TED.
Thank you, Caroline, and welcome to our learning event. My name is Jane Adams and I am the TED Programme Manager for YMCA Lincolnshire. I'd now like to give you an overview of the Ageing Better programme and the work of TED. TED is part of Ageing Better, the 7-year £84 million programme set up by the National Lottery Community Fund, the largest funder of community activity in the UK. Ageing Better partnerships are based in 14 locations across England, from Torbay to Middlesbrough and the Isle of Wight to East Lindsey. Working with people, charities, businesses, public sector services and voluntary groups, the Ageing Better partnerships are exploring creative ways for people aged over 50 to be actively involved in their local communities, helping to combat social isolation and loneliness. Ageing Better is one of 5 major programmes set up by the National Lottery Community Fund to test and learn from new approaches to designing services which aim to make people's lives healthier and happier. TED has been working with individuals, groups, organisations and local businesses across East Lindsey since 2015. Next slide, please. East Lindsey is a rural area that contains a number of towns, but also has a significantly sparse population made up of smaller towns, villages, hamlets, and individual dwellings. A significant part of the district comprises of coastal communities and coastline. It has an ageing population disproportionately higher than the national average. Challenges for the population include areas of deprivation, access to and use of affordable transport, access to other public services, leisure and town hubs, issues with internet connectivity and mobile phone signal in a number of areas, and an inward migration of people that move into the district to retire. Next slide, please. However, East Lindsey is an attractive rural and coastal landscape, providing large open spaces and lots of fresh air. Property prices are reasonable compared to the national averages, particularly for those who have chosen to retire here from higher priced areas and buy property. There is a willingness by the local authority and other organisations to improve things for older people in coastal and market towns. And some villages have a variety of activities, often based around a community centre. Therefore, some older people have very active and stimulating social lives. The recent COVID-19 crisis has encouraged older people to fully engage with digital communication, giving some people the motivation to explore digital technology for the first time, while others have grown in confidence to explore a wider range of digital options, opening up more opportunities to feel connected. Next slide, please. So TED's aim is to ensure that people living in East Lindsey and aged over 50 feel less isolated and lonely, become actively involved in their communities, are engaged in the design and delivery of services that improve their social connections, are recognised for their positive contribution to society, and feel more positive about ageing and related opportunities this presents. This slide showcases how we reach those aged over 50 in East Lindsey. TED commissions 5 delivery partners who are organisations operating within East Lindsey. Links Digital offer digital skills training, supporting those who want to be online and for those who are online but want to develop their skills. Citizens Advice Lindsey offer advice and guidance, providing information, advice and advocacy services to older people. Magna Vitae offer fitness, food and friends sessions, which is a health and wellbeing programme. Carers First offer a male focus project called Men Do, supporting male carers to have some time away from their responsibilities. And Age UK Lindsey offer a befriending service, providing one-to-one support and friendship to over 50s who live alone and feel isolated and lonely. The internal TED team work on the areas of friendship groups. These groups are volunteer-led and offer people within the community to get together on a regular basis to meet and have a coffee and chat. We currently have 6 friendship groups in East Lindsey. We have over 100 age-friendly businesses in East Lindsey that have been recognised for providing an excellent service and environment for older customers. The free TED Age-Friendly Business Award gives customers the confidence to know that businesses meet a range of criteria, from a clutter-free environment to excellent customer service. Age-Friendly East Lindsey, as a result of a partnership between East Lindsey District Council and YMCA Lincolnshire, an age-friendly principal officer started in post in June 2019. The officer's role was created in order to assess the age-friendliness of East Lindsey and to develop an age-friendly strategy for the district. You'll hear more about this work later in the event. Collecting learning and evaluation of the work we do. The TED Learning and Evaluation Officer will be presenting today an outline of the work he has completed and has planned. And events and communication, sharing the work of TED and the other partnerships. Next slide, please. At the start of lockdown in March 2020, the TED programme had to very quickly adapt to the changing situation of COVID. All involved were able to diversify and change their methods as all face-to-face delivery had to be paused. We set up the Connected Helpline, which is a befriending offer to support those who needed help. In the first month, the main requests were of how to get food and prescriptions, and as time passed, it became more of a friendship service. We were able to extend this service Lincolnshire-wide, supporting those who weren't aware of TED. All commission delivery partners adapted and offer support in various ways: digital skills, information advice, peer support, online activities. The friendship group stopped face-to-face delivery, and the key lead volunteers supported participants by offering help, and this is still ongoing. TED also worked with the Lincolnshire Chamber of Commerce in the summer of 2020. The Chamber was looking for businesses who were going the extra mile during the crisis, helping local NHS hospitals and care services, or lending a hand to support the more vulnerable in the local community. A separate recognition, working in partnership with TED in East Lindsey, was to recognise those businesses who adapted to supporting the over 50s. The response to the initiative received was fantastic, with nearly 200 nominations. It really highlighted the crucial part businesses play in keeping the community spirit alive in such hard times. Next slide, please. This slide shows some of the wellbeing visits the TED officer completed with one of the TED age-friendly businesses, Rainbow Dreaming with the ponies. It also shows some wonderful examples of the pictures we received for Operation Pen Pal. It shows a wellbeing package sent to participants by Carers First, who were given a ukulele to learn. And finally, the Lincolnshire Chamber of Commerce initiative to celebrate and recognise the business heroes across Lincolnshire. We've had over 10,000 individual calls requests for support to the TED programme since March 2020 lockdown. The TED programme is providing ongoing befriending and wellbeing calls, and we've received over 1,000 referrals to and from external agencies. Next slide, please. So what does TED look like in Year 7? We are very aware the current situation is still uncertain, and even when some of the lockdown restrictions lift, people may potentially take some time to feel confident to venture out and commence participation in face-to-face activities. Our delivery is flexible, and our initial plans are to offer a blended service, so a mix of face-to-face activities and virtual. We are very fortunate to be able to continue our work into Year 7, and so this slide shows what we hope to do subject to COVID regulations. Under the age-friendly umbrella, we hope to continue the work for age-friendly East Lindsey, continue the promotion of the Age-Friendly Business Award, and to look into providing some form of age-friendly training to individuals and organisations. Under the Friendship and Befriending umbrella, we hope to continue to support and develop of the TED friendship groups, and to support the progression of befriending activities delivered via TED friendship groups and the internal TED team. The Commission delivery partners will continue to offer a blended service, giving information, advice and guidance with a particular focus on financial inclusion, supporting male carers with potential to extension for female carers, continuation of a digital offer to include digital skills and supporting older people online, to continue the health and wellbeing programme of Fitness, Food and Friends, and to continue to help an increased number of over 50s through befriending support. We would really like to ensure the legacy of TED continues, as we have learnt so much and proved there is a benefit to what we do to those individuals and communities. This event will cover some of the amazing work we have done. Next slide, please. And finally, we hope you enjoy the event. Please submit any questions you may have in the chat function, and we will look to pull these together at the end of the event. If you would like any more information on the TED programme, please do contact us. I'm now going to hand over to our next speakers, which is Liz Price and Ivan Annable, to go through their evaluation key findings. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Liz Price. I'm a researcher in the University of Lincoln Business School, and together with colleagues from the university and Ivan and colleagues from Regeneration, we've worked on the external evaluation of the TED programme over the last 2 years. Today we're going to present some selected findings from our evaluation report. I'm going to speak first, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ivan. And I'm going to start by presenting some initial impact figures and some information on trends in participants' sense of health and social isolation and their participation in social activities. And then I'm going to talk through some of the qualitative interviews that we've done, really with one aspect of TED, which is around befriending calls, which is particularly relevant really for the last year of lockdown. So I'm going to talk about the experiences of people who've received befriending calls. And then I'm going to cover briefly a case study that we've done on the Bimbrook Friendship Group as well, and the support that the Friendship Group has received through TED. When I pass on to Ivan will talk about the social value engine and the analysis of social value from the project, and also the legacy and the future of the TED programme. Next slide, please. So here we have some initial headline figures really from the dashboard for TED. So nationally, there's an evaluator called Chorus who pulled together surveys of participants using something called the Common Measurement Framework. And they pull this together in a dashboard that local partnerships can access to try and understand the data and the experiences of participants in their area. So I'm going to look at this first and then move on to a more detailed look at the figures behind this. So we can see here that within the first 3 rows, looking at social activities and volunteering, around 3/4 of participants indicated that they had continued or increased their engagement in social activities, their memberships of clubs and societies, and also that they were considering putting themselves forward for volunteering. The Common Measurement Framework includes an entry-level survey and then the number of follow-ups, so it's possible to measure trend over time, and these 3 variables show a positive uplift in the percentage of participants that have continued being involved or would have increased their involvement in these activities. When we look at health and well-being, the picture is a little bit less clear. So we have around 2/3 of participants saying that how they rate their health, their sense of well-being, their quality of life has improved or stayed the same. But there's a negative trend between the entry level and the uplift. And around 2/3 also say that they feel that they can personally influence local decisions, again with a slight negative trend. So here we've got a slightly mixed picture. And what we've done is to try and understand what lies behind these headline figures is to create our own local database. So we've worked with Community Links to input the surveys for the CMF locally, which has created a database of more than 560 participant surveys with 6 follow-ups, which has really helped us to understand what lies behind some of these headline figures on the dashboard. So I'm going to talk through some of these now. Next slide, please. Okay, so what the local database has enabled us to do is really to look a little bit more at the trends, and also to come to a little bit more detail at some of the variables we haven't been able to break down from the dashboard. So the first pie on the left really shows the breakdown of participants by delivery partner, and you can see here that we've got a broad representation of the delivery partners that have been involved in TED, with a large proportion of those from friendship groups, but also from Links Digital, from Age UK, Lindsey, and also from some of the delivery partners from the first phase of TED, such as Lincolnshire CVS and Voiceability. If you look at the second pie chart, this asks participants about how they found out about the project, so really kind of routes of engagement and awareness for them. And what this shows is that traditional methods of advertising and promotion have really been effective for TED. So you can see the orange slice of the pie at 31% refers to leaflet or poster. So you can see that those very traditional forms of advertising have worked quite well for TED participants. And beyond that, referral and signposting from agencies that participants are already involved in, such as project staff, adult and social care, are really important, as well as referral through GPs and pharmacists as well. So here you can see that there are many different routes to awareness for TED, and that the routes used by TED have been effective, the variety of routes. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we look at how participants rate their general level of health by the first survey that they completed, by the different follow-up surveys. So really it gives us a longitudinal trend over time, and the scale is between 1 and 100. So we can see here a fairly consistent picture over the first 3 follow-ups at least, with a slight decline in the last 2. So it suggests really over time that participants maintain a similar sense of well-being. When we're looking at this data, however, we need to bear in mind a couple of things. So firstly, we need to bear in mind the caveat that the survey itself does not ask participants whether any change in their sense of health or well-being is related to the TED project. And therefore it's difficult for us to directly relate any change to the project. So we can say that participants' health while participating in the project, but not because of participating in the project. Secondly, we found, or researchers who've worked on similar evaluations in the team have found that participation in support initiatives does not always result in improvements to participants' sense of well-being and health. And this is for a number of reasons. And one of those is that sometimes when participants join a support initiative, they actually become more aware of their sense of social isolation. In actually going through the process of seeking support, they become more aware of their own circumstances and how it compares to others. So we need to bear those things in mind when we're looking at this data. The second graph shows this general level of health. So we're talking about an average of around 75, 76 out of 100, how this compares across participants by who they live with. And here we can see quite a big contrast between the ratings of those who live alone and those who live with others. So participants who live alone rate themselves on an average of sort of 60 out of 100. Those who live with others around 80 out of 100. So here we can see the difference that living with other people and how it makes to the participants, and how living alone can actually affect health. So this is a key aspect of the focus of TED in helping to reduce that social isolation. I think it shows quite starkly the difference that living alone can make to people and their sense of well-being. Next slide, please. So in the first graph here, we can see quite a positive trend. So this refers to the proportion of participants who say that they participate the same or more often as others of the same age. And here we can see that there's generally a positive trend here, which could be related to and could reflect their participation in TED activities. So this is a positive trend that we're seeing. And then the second graph breaks that down by delivery partner. So where we have sufficient responses, we've been able to break down each of these by delivery partner. And here we can see a fairly consistent picture across all the delivery partners in how often participants perceive themselves to participate in social activities. So this is quite a positive reflection on the project, I think. Next slide, please. The picture around isolation is a little bit more mixed. So the first graph asks participants how often they feel isolated, and it shows the proportion of those saying often. So for the first 3 surveys, we see the proportion of those saying that they often feel isolated actually declining. But then in the final follow-up, it increases again. So clearly there isn't a very defined picture for this particular variable. But I think what this shows is that there isn't necessarily a clear relationship between participation in social activities, such as that shown on the previous graph, and a sense of social isolation. So we know that social isolation is a much broader issue that's affected by who the participant lives with, their sense of health, whether they've been bereaved, and how often they're in touch with friends and family. So those two are not necessarily have a clear relationship or have a clear influence on each other. The final chart analyses the proportion of participants who say that they're thinking about volunteering in the future. And this shows a positive trend. And certainly in the qualitative interviews that we've undertaken, we found that as participants engage in TED-funded activities, whether that be group activities or befriending, then some of them become more interested in putting themselves forward for providing support to others, for becoming a befriender. So this seems to be a really positive reflection on TED, and also on the project in facilitating further involvement and in the actual running and decision making, and the support that's being offered through the project as well among older people. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to move on to discussion of the qualitative interviews. So as I mentioned, these focus on one aspect of TED provision around befriending, and we'll also talk a little bit about friendship groups as well. So our team undertook semi-structured, in-depth telephone interviews with participants in the last month. And these included participants of Age UK Lindsey, Connected, Citizens Advice Lindsey, and also the Binbrook Friendship Group as well, and Magna Vitae as well, I should add as well. So we're really grateful to the delivery partners for liaising with participants on our behalf to make these interviews possible, which obviously have had to take place over the phone during lockdown. We would have liked to have done them face to face otherwise. So the interviews we used to explore how the participants became aware of the projects, how they became involved in them, what their experiences were of participating, and their broader reflections on the projects, including areas that they could identify where there could be some development. Next slide, please. So in terms of views on befriending, generally participants found out about the service by being signposted to it via a variety of routes. So examples included participants who were already involved with Age UK Lindsey, perhaps they had volunteered in an Age UK Lindsey shop, participants who had previously engaged with Magna Vitae through their fitness, food and friendship groups. We have participants whose GPs had referred them, who had suggested that befriending may help them, and participants who had been ill and who had been referred through Macmillan nurses. So generally speaking, it had been through existing delivery partners and partner organisations that had referred participants into the befriending service. We found that the befrienders were generally in contact with participants once a week, sometimes once a fortnight or less. And among the participants that we spoke to, most had first accessed the service from March last year, so around a year ago when lockdown first happened. That resulted in a very sudden change in circumstance for many of the participants. Many had health conditions and they found themselves needing to shield. And so all their previous social activities that they were involved with had to stop, and they found themselves, many of them living alone, not being able to go out. And so the befriending service was particularly helpful to them and particularly needed for them. So in terms of the value of the activity, the only overwhelming response from participants was that the main value was in supporting their mental health. So, you know, one participant said, well, without them, I'd have gone crackers. It'd really been a very difficult time for many of the people that we had spoken to. So just having that phone call to break up the week, having somebody to check in on them, somebody to speak to on a regular basis really helped them. Some mentioned the value of the befriender calling them. So the fact that they didn't have to ring somebody rang them, which meant that they didn't feel the need to ask for help, was really important. And others identified the skill of the befriender. So really in identifying when they didn't feel right, even if they didn't want to admit it. So one participant mentioned that the befrienders were really skilled in prompting conversations that enabled them to open up and talk about their problems. And they probably wouldn't have been able to do that without that skill of the befriender in sort of prompting and probing them. Next slide, please. So here I've just included some quotes. I won't read through them, but you can see the experience expressed through these quotes from the participants. So the first one relates to that the fact that they're very that they phone them rather than the participant having to phone the befriender, and that is really helpful because they don't want to feel like they're a burden, that they're bothering people with their problems, that actually that's something that the befriender will talk to them about, and it helps them to open up and discuss their problems, which makes them feel better. The second participant talked about, well, I can't go out and I'm shielding. You know, the befrienders really helped me mentally. During that time, the participant had 2 new grandchildren that she hadn't been able to see. And it really helped her that the befriender had rung her faithfully once a fortnight or monthly. For the Magna Vitae participant, it was really helpful to her that that she had a befriending call every week, how interesting it was to talk to them, and how it was nice that the befriender was interested in talking to her, and the value of a Christmas hamper and how thoughtful that was. So as much as it was nice to receive the contents of the hamper, it was a thoughtfulness that somebody had thought to do that, and that was really welcomed. And then the final quote shows that there was a sense that there was an increase in demand for befrienders during lockdown. So sometimes there could be delays between each call. Perhaps there was a lot of demand, and that reflects perhaps the increase in demand that was created through the imposition of lockdown restrictions. Next slide, please. So in terms of the value of the activity, the ongoing relationship with the befriender was really, really valued. Developing that one-to-one relationship with one befriender in particular and developing a rapport with that person was highlighted. And having a local befriender, so some participants had a befriender from outside of Lincolnshire, and they were a bit concerned that in case of emergency they wouldn't be able to call on them in the same way they would if somebody lived closer. Also signposting to other services. So participants talked about how you know, they had signposted to other delivery partners such as Links Digital for support with access to the internet and using their iPad, but also to services such as food delivery and takeaway services that they wouldn't have otherwise known about. And as I mentioned, the value of the support parcels during this time was really appreciated by participants. I also mentioned the increased demand for befriending. So some did sense a strain associated with demand. Sometimes befrienders changed because of this strain, and also perhaps there were increased gaps between befriending calls. But in response to this, some of those who were befriended had gone on to become befrienders themselves. So they recognised the gap and they put themselves forward as a way of providing extra resource and supporting others in the way that they had been supported, and also as a way of improving their level of social engagement as well. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to move on to talking about the friendship groups, really with this case study of Binbrook Friendship Group. And I'll just talk about the nature of the friendship group and then how TED has supported it. So I'm sure many people are familiar with Binbrook, but it's a village of sort of less than 1,000 residents in the middle of the Wolds, which kind of makes it quite remote from many places, kind of equal distance between Louth and Market Raisin. The friendship group first started there back in November 2018 with a first coffee morning that was held in the village pub called The Plough. And after that, the initiator, Bunny Harris, and her co-organisers decided to hold a coffee morning every month in The Plough. And it attracted many older people in the village, men and women, who came along for coffee and cake and to have informal chats. And many of them stayed on for lunch, which then supported The Plough as well. The friendship group ran a series of guest speaker events. So they had the fire station, the vicar, the PCSO, for example, come and speak to people at the friendship groups. And working with other groups in the village, they're able to put on various coach trips to places of interest for people in the village as well. And before lockdown, the friendship group was really felt to have made a difference for how integrated people felt in the village. So the initiator, Bunny, and others in the village were newcomers to Lincolnshire, many from down south, and they felt that the friendship group had helped them to integrate with people who'd lived in the village longer or for all their lives. So it really helped them to get to know each other. But during lockdown, of course, many of the older people were shielding. They weren't allowed to have face-to-face social contact, and so they had stayed in, and so the coffee mornings could no longer take place. Next slide, please. So we talked to the members of the Binbrook Friendship Group about the kind of support that they received through the TED project, and there were a variety of ways in which TED had supported them. So they mentioned that TED were really helpful in coming up with ideas. So the founder of the group said, well, I come up with ideas, but it's really nice for other people to have ideas and to pass those on. So she felt that TED came forward with ideas from other groups, from their other activities, which really helped them plan the activities of the group. They had TED officers who came along and attended monthly coffee mornings, and they provided access to funding for things that were quite simple but quite helpful to the group. So, for example, a tablecloth for their coffee mornings and an advertising banner so they could advertise the coffee mornings outside the pub. The Plough also received an Age-Friendly Business Award for its role in supporting older people in the community, also supported through TED. And Magna Vitae had begun before lockdown running Food Fridays, so they actually delivered activities in the village for local people on a weekly basis, and that was really, really valued, and a lot of people were really looking forward to that starting up again as lockdown restrictions ease. And in place of the Food Fridays, Magna Vitae had continued supporting the group with befriending calls and also Christmas parcels during lockdown. The members of the friendship group also mentioned that their involvement in TED had really helped to raise the profile of the group and the community within East Lindsey. So Binbrook is kind of located to the west of East Lindsey, almost on the border with West Lindsey. It's quite far from the coastal communities of Skegness and Mablethorpe. And the organiser said, well, you know, because of our involvement in TED, we no longer feel like we're the last outpost. We're on the map. We're not just on the corner and out of sight. It's helped bring us all together. And so it was kind of that they were reflecting on the role of TED in building that community capacity, but also linking them with other activities that were going on. They were finding out what was happening in other areas of the district, but also other groups and activities were finding out what was happening in Binbrook Friendship Group as well. So I think it's quite a nice example, really, of while TED has supported a lot of commissioned services, it's also supported groups that have been initiated within the community. So it's helped build that community capacity and support the growth of those community groups in areas where those activities are already taking place. Another activity that I will quickly mention, but I know that Jane Burney is going to talk about in more detail, is the Ageing Without Children group. So we also spoke to Patricia Fox, who is setting up that group. And Patricia had decided to set the group up in response to, she recognised that there was a bit of a gap in support groups for older people without children, and felt that while watching the news during lockdown, it was mainly focused on older people with grandchildren who couldn't see their grandchildren. And again, this is another community kind of developed activity initiated by someone within the community, but TED has helped Patricia to develop the idea more and to actually launch the activity as well. But I'll leave it to Jane to talk about that in a bit more detail. Okay, so that's from me. I'll now pass over to Ivan.
Thank you very much, Liz. People are getting towards the home straight in the first half of this event now, because there's been quite a lot of talking. I'm going to do a bit more, but then you can get the kettle on and have a cup of tea and just reflect on what's been said. If we could have my first slide, please. Excellent. Before I come on and explain this slide, I just wanted to say a few big picture things about TED. And to me, what's fascinating about it is that it's been going for 7 years. So, you know, a lot of the people on this call will be used to the fact that, you know, funding is quite fickle. It comes in short-term bursts. Just as you're starting to achieve something, it's turned off or it disappears. And what's been a great pleasure for myself and Liz and other members of the evaluation team is to look at something which by normal standards is a very mature and well-developed programme. And that's quite appropriate for something that supports people who are older. But from my perspective, what I wanted to do was talk to you about some of the social value that's been delivered by TED, and then some thinking about its legacy and evolution, because all good things come to an end, and TED will smear into, I think, a range of other positive initiatives and activities, but is reaching probably the end of its funded duration. So to quote Oscar Wilde, and Oscar Wilde has to be quoted in every one of a 2-hour-long presentation, doesn't he? But to quote him, a cynic is somebody who knows the cost of everything and understands the value of nothing. And as evaluators, what we've been seeking to do is to turn that on its head and to understand the value that's been delivered by TED in more than just counting things, in more than just trying to work out what the pile of beans adds up to. We've been thinking about what are the long-term impacts, outcomes and legacies. And if those things were easy to sort out, people like myself wouldn't be employed, because you'd just be able to flick a switch and they'd be there for you to know. Fortunately, it's not that easy to actually put a framework around and a justification in place for the things that we know are important, that are good, that have arisen from something like TED, but are hard to measure. And really, that's what we've contributed to this evaluation. We've actually gone down a route of starting to do that. And we've done it following the principles of something called social return on investment. And what social return on investment does is it identifies a list of outcomes. It then matches them to something that we call a financial proxy, which is something which is an appropriate comparison to what's been achieved, but to which we can ascribe a financial value. It then enables you to tot up all the different outcomes and their values, and then divide them by the cost of delivering the program and get a ratio, just like the kind of ratio you might think about if you're going to invest some money in the building society or the bank. So how many pounds would you earn for each pound you'd invested? Apart from here, we're talking about social value and social outcomes. We're not talking about straightforward pounds, shillings and pence. So what we've done is to look at the different outcomes that have been achieved by TED, and to do that process of ascribing a financial proxy to each of them. And that's given us a value, but we've done more than that, because what's tended to happen with social value since it was first invented, is that people have concentrated too much on the ratio, and that can be quite an abstract thing. So if I tell you that TED's delivered £11 for each pound invested, you might think, well, that's great. But then you might think, hang on a minute, I don't know whether or not other similar schemes have achieved more or less. So we have to provide a context. And the way we do that is to actually ascribe to each of these financial proxies a link back to one of the 8 domains in what's called the Bristol Accord. And the Bristol Accord is a means of interpreting the sustainability of a place. And that brings me to this diagram. So this diagram shows you the Bristol Accord. And this is quite important because it's going to enable me in a few minutes to talk to you about not just the social return on investment that we've identified that TED is on a trajectory towards achieving, but also how it's impacted in East Lindsey in terms of these factors here: governance, transport and connectivity, services, equity. And that's really important because if we're talking about, and I'll come on the last slide and do that, TED's legacy, we need to understand how it's addressed some of those challenges. And really, Liz has given us a wonderful example in the context of Binbrook of that, which incidentally, for those who didn't know, it's where they also filmed that wonderful film Memphis Belle, but that's another story. But really, this brings it alive, that case study for the whole of TED over the whole geography of East Lindsey. So if I could have the next slide, please. So this is just a refresher on the different core services that have been contracted, which Jane has mentioned previously and have featured in Liz's discussion. And you've got there, you know, a nice range of things. And then in addition to those, you've also got the age-friendly business work that is undertaken, which Jane Burney will talk more about later, but which is also very important. So if I could have the next slide, please. So here we go. This is the forecast that we produced last year to look at the social value that had been delivered by TED. And it comes, as I said, out of taking each of those different projects I identified, plus age-friendly businesses, identifying the beneficial outcomes they've had, ascribing a social value through a financial proxy to those outcomes, and then coming up with a ratio. And I've just spoken a load of gobbledygook for the last 20 seconds, for which I apologize. It's the kind of language of evaluators, but hopefully what this slide will do is enable you to get a handle on what that means in practical terms. So at the end of 2020, we were able to identify that between 600 and 700,000 pounds worth of value to society had been delivered by the work that TED did. And when we divided that by the cost of delivering the services we'd looked at, that had delivered £11.20 for each pound invested, which if you were to get that rate of return from a bank or a building society, you'd be extremely pleased with. But then coming on to mapping that onto the Bristol Accord. If you look at the pie chart on the left, you'll see that this gives you a flavour of how that had been distributed. So it's not just a kind of a number, it's delivered £164,000 worth of activities that make people more active, inclusive and safe. It's contributed a similar amount to making local services run better. And you can see how that might be the case, for example, in the context of the Age Friendly Business Award scheme that we talked about. It's enhanced connectivities between people to the tune of nearly £250,000 worth of social value. And again, listening to some of the things that Liz had to say about the befriending type activities, you can see that there's been a major impact there. And it's increased the intensity of services that people get, and it's also increased people's sense of fairness around the way services are distributed. Now, what I've done since this slide was produced is cast further forward, and we've been able to look at the impact over the last 2 years. TED reached a bit of a crossroad position at year 5. It was then extended, so we've been looking at its subsequent life over the last 2 years. And in relation to the picture for 2020 and 2021, this figure will come down slightly. It's been impacted by coronavirus, obviously, in terms of the levels of activity and intensity, but it will still be a very handy figure which demonstrates probably around £6 to £7 of social value by the time we've finished the analysis, and just under the thick end of £1 million worth of social value driven out as a consequence of that. So this is only one technique, but it sits alongside the quantitative and qualitative analysis that Liz has undertaken, and demonstrates the sort of social footprint, social impact footprint that TED has had. And that enables us to then think about the future. So if I could have my, you'll be pleased to know, last slide, please. So we've been thinking, along with Caroline and the team at the YMCA, about what might happen next. And there's this wonderful organisation called the Local Enterprise Partnership, which is, for most of you who will have come across it, I think of as a sort of piggy bank for government funds to invest in things that are useful and helpful, and it has a pipeline. And what we've done is put together a proposal to take forward some key aspects of TED's work based on the evaluation, but also wider discussions and horizon scanning of national and even international best practice that would fund. And we've got a business plan that we've put together that would hopefully make these activities sustainable on their own terms in the longer term. But the development of an ageing hub, that's not a hub that gets old. That's a hub for people with expertise on a Lincolnshire-wide and wider basis about aging better, drawing on some of the skills and personalities that have currently been involved in TED. A know-how element, which is about sharing that good practice extensively externally, and an outreach element, which is to do with putting some wheels under some of the services that TED's had and taking them directly to smaller and less accessible communities, and some ongoing support for businesses building on the age-friendly business scheme. In addition to TED, there's been the development of a really interesting initiative in Mablethorpe. I know all good things ultimately have their origin in Mablethorpe, but not everybody would believe that, but I certainly do. And the Campus for Future Living is the idea, really looking at some of the very deep deprivation issues that exist there, particularly out of the summer season, many of which are characterized by older people. It's looking at turning that perceived weakness into a strength, and through investment that's been levered through the Towns Fund, we're about to see the process of the investment of 6.3 million in that settlement in the development of a Meditech facility run by the Medical Technology Innovation Faculty at Nottingham Trent. And the reason they're interested in having a base in Mablethorpe to work with older people is that it gives them a test population for some of the key things that they've developed around helping people to stay in their own homes for longer and be more resilient, and therefore put less pressure on the health system. It's going to be a hub for people who work in care companies that want to become self-employed, building on a model that's been very successfully implemented in Somerset. It's going to provide a base for continuing professional development training for clinicians working on the coast, because at the moment they have to hightail it into Lincoln when they're doing their CPD. And it's going to be a hub for health trainers who will work with the local community to promote and stimulate good lifestyle behaviours. So that is all now going to become a reality because of the funding that's been approved. And we're really interested to look at how TED can tuck into some of that, and perhaps even the ageing hub being co-located with it. But there's wider opportunities around the Towns Fund. I just have to pinch myself a bit, but you know, unless somebody's playing a very cruel joke on me and the other people who've been told, there is going to be the investment in East Lindsey of just under £50 million worth of regeneration funding, which will help deliver a leisure and learning centre of £12 million. In old money terms, that's a sports centre with a swimming pool in Mablethorpe, a brand new FE campus in Skegness. So that's a whole new college, which is fabulous. And also just down the road in Boston, a 10 million investment in the Mayflower Centre, which is an extension of Boston College that look a bit like the Winter Gardens in Sheffield, if anybody's ever been there. These things are all true, trust me. But these all give a real opportunity for TED to become engaged in the design and development of the older person's aspect of this work. And because of its very powerful 7-year enduring legacy and some of the potent things it's achieved that Liz has talked about and the social return on investment reveals, I think it can really get stuck into that. And then finally, another thing that I'm involved with is an initiative called the National Centre for Rural Health and Care. That's a community interest company that works across the UK, promoting linkages between different places around health and care. And the people who have developed some services in parallel with TED, the Centre for Ageing Better, and Lincolnshire's their rural vanguard county, are key members of the National Centre for Rural Health and Care. And we're looking to work together. And I know Amy, who used to be heavily involved with TED, but now works for them, is on this call to think about how the National Centre can support the development and growth of the legacy of TED. So, if you put all that together, first bit of my presentation, some exciting stats that demonstrates a very good social return on investment and a real long embedding of good practice, and then some bright sunlit uplands to look forward to going forward over the next 2 to 3 years. So hopefully on that upbeat note, I'll hand back to Jane, but that should set you up nicely for a kind of cup of tea with a smile on your face.
Thank you very much, Ivan and Liz, for that really useful insight. As Ivan said, we're now going to have a 10-minute comfort break. So if you would like to be back for 11:10, we've got our next speaker. If you don't want to tear yourself away from the screen, we do have some videos within this refreshment break, but we'll see you back here at 11:10. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. So here's the Sporting Memories group. So I don't know if this is the A team, but you're a pretty good group, to be fair. So we've got Tony here as well. Tony, where are you? Where do you live? Where are you from?
I'm Greek, but I reside in Huttoft in Lincolnshire.
Huttoft, excellent. Right, and you've been doing these sessions for a little while, haven't you, Tony?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
I think back into the early days in April, that sort of time, April, May.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So,
and then I know we had 1 or 2 different people who had a few different sign-ins who've come and go and things like that. But over the months, what have you got out of this group? If you had to summarise the benefits of this group, what would you maybe say?
I think it's a welcome distraction. from the day-to-day pressures of life and what might you be going through. And I find sometimes the questions stimulate and connect bits of your memory that you've forgotten about.
Yeah.
You know, you come up with an answer out of the blue and you go, where's that come from?
That's right, yeah. That's really good. And the way it's developed, have you found, because obviously in the early days we were telephone conferencing.
Yes.
And have you found this, the way we are now, an improvement for you personally?
It is indeed. It's because obviously, you know, communications, you know, they say that 90% of it is non-verbal, and with the visual aspects of it, you can see the empathy or how what people are trying to convey when they're trying to talk to you. So it's a lot more comprehensive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's really good. And I'm just trying to think. So the value to you, because I was just remembering a few times, Tony, in the past when I've rung you up for a group session and you've either just got in the door from a long journey at work or you've swung into a lay-by,
yeah,
and you've still done the session, which kind of told me, you know, that you must quite enjoy doing it.
Yeah, it's well, you have a team, and you know, I'm hoping that you are keeping a competitive tally of where we are against all the others.
I certainly am.
I know you try to diffuse it and say, "Oh, it's just for fun and thing," but we're all competitive, and we're all committed
Absolutely.
to it.
Well, I think at the minute, if I take a Premier League example, you're probably in a Man United sort of position, shall I say, or a Leicester City. So you're doing all right, to be fair, yeah. So that's really good. So thanks for sharing that, Tony. That's really good.
Okay.
Right, Tony, so now you've joined us, I'm sure you want to field the next question.
Okay.
Let's have a little look. So we're on to, what we're on to? Number 8. Right. This is quite an interesting one. Football we're on now. Which England international played for these following clubs in pretty much this order? Sheffield Wednesday, Leeds, Coventry, Southampton, Nottingham Forest. Quite a mixture. So I'll give you a few choices to get the old memory going there. Des Walker, I remember him. Chris Bart Williams, Carlton Palmer. Sure you recognise all those names.
Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, Leeds, Coventry, Southampton and Forest. Gained about 18 caps, something like that for England.
Yeah. I'm gonna guess Carlton Palmer.
Yes. Back of the net.
Yes.
It is Carlton, yeah. Do you remember him? Quite a gangly sort of player, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And yeah, he did move around a heck of a lot. Did you know that one, Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good little player, really.
Yeah, a few people have gone, yeah. Des Walker sometimes sidetracks people a bit because obviously he was Wednesday in Forest, wasn't he? Because he had a spate overseas, didn't work out at all, came back. Chris Bart Williams, no, he didn't move to those. But yeah, that's a really good spot on there, Carlton.
Yeah.
The village that I grew up in during the 1950s and 60s was, on reflection, very age-friendly without anyone realising it at the time. It was the way communities were then and had been for decades. Many inhabitants were from long-established extended families, but newcomers like us were welcome if they were willing to take an active part in village life. The community was almost self-contained. 3 shops, 4 pubs, a baker, milkman, roadman, vicar, handyman, petrol station, and of course a policeman. A branch line and bus service linked to the nearby market town. Community activities, the fete, jumble sales, and the annual bonfire, for example, were many. Was there a time for anyone to feel isolated or lonely, except perhaps by choice? Of course, we can't turn the clock back to those days, and the village where I've now lived for over 40 years, like many throughout East Lindsey, is very different. We've lost facilities, especially our chippy, which we still mourn, but we're more fortunate than some. It's still a caring place, as evidenced by the Tuesday Lunch Club and the excellent shop delivering to the housebound. The village charity is there to help those in need, and the parish council played a large part recently in getting 8 bungalows built for the elderly. Technology has brought the Marsh Chapel Spotted Facebook page, where anyone can post asking anything from help finding a plumber or lost pet to reporting a suspicious vehicle. Clearly, we are still age friendly, but in a different way. COVID, incidentally, has increased those out and about, dog walking, taking exercise. I've met far more villagers than I've ever done in the past as a direct result. Something positive. I hope it continues.
I'm portfolio holder for Better Ageing, an older persons champion at East Lindsey District Council. So for me, age friendly is creating an environment where older people feel safe and secure because they have a genuine connection. Age friendly is where you have communities where it's safe for all to walk in streets, where housing is suitable and adaptable for all age groups, and where there are public transport options which are affordable and accessible. It's where there are outdoor spaces which are well lit, signage is clear, and there is appropriate street furniture. There may be parks to enjoy and take exercise. There must be clean, safe, accessible public toilets which are open into the evening. It's where older people have access to services and have the opportunity to influence decision makers and engage in community decisions. Communities must be age friendly and allow people of all ages to participate in activities that keep the community healthy and encourage economic stability. It's a place where older people can easily stay connected with family and friends and remain independent. Everyone is treated with respect, regardless of age. There's enhanced community spirit. Older people feel confident and valued. That's age friendly.
A box step's going to go out, out, in. So out with both legs, in with both legs. Right, and then we're going to add your arms. So out to the side, bring them in. Legs back out in front again. And you're going to do the same arm, same leg this time.
Just going to wait a minute until everybody just joins us, but hope if you're able to see that video and wanted to take part in some of that seated exercise, you did so. So we'll just give it one more minute for everybody to rejoin, and then we will go to our next speaker. Okay, welcome back everybody. Hopefully everybody's had a little bit of a break, and I'm now in a position to introduce you to Mo Ray, who is going to give a sort of big picture overview on the work that she has taken part in. So over to you, Mo. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. It's a real pleasure to have been asked to present at this event, and my thanks to the organisers for the invite and for putting together such a great programme for the day. I think I look a bit different from the photograph that's on the front page. This is my lockdown version. So perhaps we could start off. So I'm Mo Ray and I work in the School of Health and Social Care at the University of Lincoln. And my research predominantly focuses on research around, thank you. My research predominantly focuses around experiences of old age and ageing, experiences of care, and also social relationships in older age. And I'm also very interested in participatory approaches to research and service development. It's quite difficult to think about the idea of a big picture in a few minutes. So my plan today is to offer some reflections about population ageing, and then to give a brief example of co-produced work involving older people that I've had the pleasure of working on for the last several years. So we've all heard a lot about the fact that we're living in an ageing society. And I'm not going to go through the figures again today because they're often presented at the beginning of a presentation about experiences of ageing, and they're often presented in the figures speak for themselves kind of way. So what I want to focus on instead in today's short presentation is to spend a bit of time thinking about the ways that we can conceive and construct population ageing, and the kinds of messages that it might give to older people and to society at large, myself included as an older woman. I then want to briefly describe an example which illustrates how older citizens have contributed to addressing the challenges, problems and the opportunities that we face in rural Lincolnshire and beyond through a piece of research. So for too long, we've tended to focus, I think, on what we might see as the problem of old age. More recently, we've seen something of a split between the so-called third age, that's often characterised in the media as the well-off, better-off, retired, active, spending pension lump sums on camper vans and saga cruises, out and about and doing. Of course, these are stereotypes of ageing, but nevertheless, they're very powerful. The second group are sometimes called the fourth age, and they're distinctly split from the young old age or active old age into often people in advanced old age, and they're characterised as people who have a loss of agency because of impairment and disability. They lose control, and it's an experience, this notion of the fourth age, about which we can know little. And it's often this group that causes the most concern for policymakers and governments. And they're often constructed, however subtly, as a burden on the public purse and accompanied by concerns about how we're going to pay for it all. Now, I think there's also a tendency to sort of lump older people together, especially if they're identified as belonging to this so-called fourth age, into a sort of a homogenous lump. And they're often referred to as the elderly, for example, care of the elderly. And my argument, and those are people better than I, is that the elderly obscures the huge diversity that exists amongst all people in later life, and which we're seeing in fine style today, as it does through the whole life course. It's conceivable to be a member of the elderly for 50 years. There's no other part of the life course where you might be deemed as the anything, and certainly not for up to 50 years. But I think this tendency to think about old age as a kind of a homogenized experience, particularly as we move into advanced old age, has a number of implications. It can hide or make it harder to understand experiences of inequality and marginalization that affect particular groups of people, older people. It can hide or marginalize the massive contributions and importance of older citizens in the work that they do, to contribute in all kinds of ways to our well-being and our civic well-being. It can allow us to make inappropriate assumptions about what people want or need, and this can not only be incorrect, but also potentially dangerous. It can fuel and reinforce messages of, say, burden, dependency and vulnerability and passivity that older people, especially if they've been defined as having high support needs, get what they're given. And it can separate these older people from the rest of the life course, which is inappropriate, and it can reinforce age-based stereotypes and discrimination. And you can see this from research that people like the Centre for Ageing Better have done, and a recent report on experiences of age-based discrimination and ageing, the report Doddery but Dear. And they also did some research which looked at words most commonly used in media and policy reports about ageing. And this analysis showed that ageing was most commonly associated with words like decline, ill health, and older people were most commonly portrayed as frail, as vulnerable and dependent, with the top 10 most frequently used words across society, including help, care, support, dementia, and the NHS. And similar findings were found in relation to analysis of political writing. I'm certainly not trying to imply that ageing does not present real challenges for people and policymakers, but it also presents opportunities. And we've seen this today, again, in fine style with the programme that you've got. And we will, barring unfortunate circumstances, we will all make it to old age. A call surely for celebration, and a call surely to reinforce the fact that this is everybody's business. We must, I would therefore argue, look critically at the information that we're given and resist, next slide please, resist what is described as apocalyptic demography. So basically this means that old age is too often perceived and treated as essentially a bad news story, something we need to be worried about. Taking a more critical and indeed a closer look at the data reveals a different kind of picture. For example, the very low rate of older people living in care homes. I've had student nurses estimate that as many as 80% of the over 80s live in care homes, which is a wild overestimate. The numbers of people living with long-term conditions is high in older age, but nevertheless, many of those people still regard their subjective health as good and their well-being as good. The fact that not all older people are by any means lonely, but there are older people who are at much greater risk of loneliness, isolation, and social exclusion. So my point is that getting behind the data is critical. And as you've been doing here today, understanding local populations to develop relevant resources, to develop local services, and to develop relevant means to improve resilience. This helps us also to avoid incorrect stereotypes and to face the real inequalities that some older people may face and the discriminatory attitudes that very many older people say they experience on a day-to-day basis. One area that older people have often been overlooked in is hearing their voice and lived experience in service design and development, policy development and research. Imogen Blood from Joseph Rowntree went so far as to say that what we know is almost nothing about the experience of older people living with high support needs, and that this was very much a picture of services being developed for rather than with. Now, as I'm sure you know, the pillars of active ageing policy highlight the importance of accessible resources and services, and also the importance of all older people, to the extent that they wish and that they're able to participate in civic society. And participation is a topic that I now want to focus on for the rest of this short presentation, and to give a brief example of the ways in which older citizens do and can shape the work of people like me, and in collaborations with organisations such as TED. Next slide, please. So it's a big umbrella, participatory approaches. They've been around for a good while, and they operate at very many different levels. And along a continuum, if you like, from at one end, having no control, being done to, given to, and at the other, having considerable control, user-led, citizen-led organisations and services. Participation is sometimes referred to as consumerist approaches versus democratic approaches. So by consumerist, we mean the sorts of participation that perhaps ultimately to improve the product of the organisation that's seeking the views of people. So for example, surveys or consultation exercises could be defined often as consumerist perspectives. So in this approach, there's no transfer of power or control. People may say they felt as if they were simply there to rubber stamp a decision that had already been made. The power remains in the hands of the organisation or the decision makers. Democratic participation highlights collaboration, which includes a decision-making and power to make those decisions. And there's also an unsettling of established power relationships and traditional sort of hierarchies. So there's a much more interchange between all people rather than decisions held at the top. So don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying that surveys don't have a place, but if participation, I think, is to be used to affect real change and to be responsive to the communities it services and serves, then an approach to participation further towards a democratic end of the sort of line, if you like, may be more appropriate. Next slide, please. So co-production, also another very slippery concept, but if we think about co-production from democratic participation, we can see that it focuses on a number of attributes that are really important in terms of thinking about the way we might involve older citizens in participation. So it's about celebrating and recognising assets and strengths. It's about relationships, that people work in relationships together and that they're reciprocal. It's about developing networks. It's about working towards transformation and change and changing established power relationships. And it's also about being involved in all aspects of service planning, in development, in delivery and evaluation. And indeed, the same sort of thing would apply in terms of research, which is obviously my kind of interest. Next slide, please. But if we think about older citizens, they've often not had a great deal of say, for example, in service redesign or indeed in collaboration in research. So I'm going to focus now very briefly on a research example which has involved older people as co-collaborators and as co-researchers from inception right through to the end of the process. Next slide, please. So the case for participation and co-produced research is not different, not very different from the sorts of cases that you might make at TED, for example. It's about making sure that research is accessible and goes far beyond engaging with just the academic community. How can we make our research relevant to citizens, to policymakers, to the end users? It also questions increasingly what counts as evidence. There's an increased value nowadays placed happily on the experience and practical knowledge, on the wisdom that experts by experience might have. And collaborative research has often been promoted as a really important way to develop research which ultimately could have more impact and more effect on, for example, stakeholders, services and resources. Next slide, please. The arguments for co-production, and again, very similar to the sorts of arguments for co-production in service development. So it's argued that co-production contributes to better understanding of the topic. It's ethically important and it has the potential to be transformative and to empower people. Next slide, please. The research that I did with my co-research team and 2 other research sites who also had co-researchers was to understand the ethical issues and the lived experience of people who pay for their own care. Now, self-funders in social care are defined as someone who pays for all of their care or support from their own private resources, including social security benefits and pension and attendance allowance, or they top up residential or domiciliary care with additional private spending. Older people are the largest group of self-funders from any other group of people, and yet we know almost nothing about them. We know nothing about their experience, about how they navigate services, how they manage self-funded care, what they buy, how they get on with it, what they do if they've got a problem with it. And indeed, even the numbers of self-funders remains unknown. We don't know how many self-funders there are. Next slide, please. So this is how our research was arranged across 3 sites, Lincolnshire, Brighton and Solihull. And we had an academic team. Myself, I was part of the academic team in Lincolnshire. We had a community partner. So our community partner was Evergreen Care, and they were experts, had expertise in delivering care and providing support to older citizens in communities. We had a group of co-researchers, and they were older citizens who either had direct experience of purchasing care for themselves or for family members, or were interested in the issue and the business of social care. And then we had knowledge exchange meetings, which involved co-researchers, academic teams, community partners with stakeholders such as social workers, commissioners, the voluntary sector, everyone involved in the care and support of older people. Next slide, please. We know that oftentimes there's no evaluation of co-produced methods, and so included in our proposal was a separate research post which undertook an evaluation of the co-produced elements. And if you'd like more information about that, or indeed more information about the project around self-funding, please do let me know. I'd be very glad to provide you with more information. Next slide, please. As I say, we've recruited 10 co-researchers, and here they are now at work at a co-research meeting. They were involved in every aspect of the project, from its identification, its design, its ethical review, fieldwork, so doing interviews with older citizens, analysis, and also disseminating and sharing our research findings. We worked together to provide training and support, so that co-researchers felt, confident to be able to come, for example, on a research interview, confident to take part in analysing what we were finding, and confident to share those findings with all sorts of audiences and communities. And people had flexibility to be able to do what most interested them, and where they felt their strengths were. But interestingly, over the course of the almost 4 years, a number of people did things that at the beginning of the project they wouldn't have imagined that they'd be doing. Next slide, please. So did the research gain from a co-produced element? From my perspective, and certainly in terms of the evaluation, undoubtedly, yes. They provided local knowledge and insight that I didn't have. They were fantastic at finding potential research participants, because although there are lots of self-funders, they're not necessarily very easy to find. They had a wonderful wealth of knowledge about local resources and local information. They obviously had personal experience often of finding and purchasing care, and they were enthusiastic and committed and visible in all elements of the research. So I'd say they influenced and shaped all elements of the research. What did I learn about co-production? I learned that it takes time, and possibly more time than I might have imagined. And it takes resource. It takes resource to provide the time for people to participate, the time for people to be trained, and also to take account of people's individual needs and circumstances. We had some gaps, I guess, in terms of representation, and that's left me with room for reflection in terms of how we engage in the future with people who could and want to take part in research as co-producers, but who perhaps weren't so easy to find and to access. One of the critical issues that I suppose in terms of co-production was they had a massive stake in some of the outputs, but would have very much liked to have done some other outputs, which we didn't have the resource to do. And I felt that that was quite difficult for me to have to kind of draw a line around what we could and what we couldn't do. And I suppose there are considerable responsibilities in co-production, because if you're serious about changing power relationships, if you're serious about flattening hierarchies, and you're serious about taking collaboration, you know, at every level of the process, then you have to be very aware of your own potential to kind of, you know, inadvertently, you know, sort of take the moral high ground or overlook someone or ignore someone. But of course also walking the line, because the budget is with you as the researcher, and the buck stops with us in terms of delivering the work. But it's been a fabulous process, and I really offer it as a fabulous example of the way, from an age-friendly perspective, older citizens have been engaged, as I say, for 4 years in delivering this research. Now, of course, one size finally doesn't fit all, and people vary in the amount that they can or are able to give. So our approach to participation must be conscious of that fact and not based on a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think if we're going to think about co-production, then we have to very seriously think about what it costs and the resource implications in order to do that properly. And it won't be something that all older citizens want to do. And as I say, here I think lies a bigger challenge in terms of finding ways to ensure that the voiceless are supported to have their views and experiences and aspirations for a good life heard as well. So I hope that this has given you some insight into how we've worked in a co-production way over a serious period of time, 4 years, and the positive impact that it's had on our research. It seems to me, as I say, to be a very positive example of the ways in which older people are not the problem, but part of the solution. Final slide, please. So thanks very much for your time. And remember, if you aren't self-defining as an older person yet, barring an accident or an off-time death, which would be highly regrettable, you too will be old. This is everyone's business. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mo. A lot of chat going on while you were giving that presentation. So, you know, a big thank you. We're now going to move on to some delivery partner perspectives. So those that are working on a TED programme, just giving their perspective. I'd like to first showcase Links Digital, which, as it says on the tin, is helping older people digitally.
Hello, I am Rich from Links Digital. My role is project manager, involved with bid writing and also the majority of tutoring, both virtual and in person, back in the community. Links Digital is a non-profit local charity. We were initially a community group that was set up with a group of like-minded people from various backgrounds, all with skills in their particular field. That was from IT skills such as myself, through health, housing and local government. That group of people decided they would like to do some work for local communities, out and about at village halls, etc. And that was really the start of Links Digital in its current format. It started with some funding from the Good Things Foundation as a result of some work that I'd done with them previously. We became a rural specialist centre, which allowed us to go out to the local rural areas with like a mobile classroom to assist people with some basic digital skills. Pretty much the general email, keeping in touch with people, getting people online, working through those hard to reach communities. As a result of that particular funding, it allowed us to develop Links Digital, and we applied to become a TED Commission service. This was back in, I believe it was 2018, in partway through one of the rounds of commissioning. We successfully applied, and we were granted that first funding, which allowed us to widen the area we were looking at and obviously deal with the over 50s. Which was a little bit more specialist than our initial group. That was a successful year, and at the end of that year we decided to look for other funding, and we decided to apply for the Prince's Countryside Fund and also look at the next round of TED Commission services. Now, as a result of the TED Commission services, we were asked if we would become a charity, mainly by the TED management group, who thought it would be a better way forward rather than the community group. And we agreed to do that, so we went through the process of setting up a charity, and the community group merged into that charity. So Links Digital as a charity came into being in 2019. I think it was May time that we actually started properly. That then started with the TED Commission Services bid, and that's the current contract that we're working on at the moment. Also at the same time, we applied to the Prince's Countryside Fund. That came about as a result of a project that I'd done previously with the Prince's Countryside Fund. We'd been very successful, overachieved on that project, and as a result, we had the privilege of meeting His Royal Highness Prince Charles at the Royal Norfolk Show. And that was a great end to that particular project. So as Links Digital, we applied and we were successful in our own right without going through any third-party funders for a contract the following year. Now that was aimed at different to the TED project. It was aimed at general age group across the rural district of East Lindsey mainly, but beyond to the further parts of Lincolnshire if we wanted to do so. So that gave us quite a large coverage to cover people from sort of leaving school age right through, thanks to the TED project. So that was really the start of the Links Digital as a charity. Moving forward beyond that, we had to obviously go through some various setup roles, and with the help of the LCVS, we went through the processes of getting all the relevant policies in place for the charity, making sure that everybody had the enhanced DBS checks, etc. So everything that was needed for that format of organisation was in place before we started those 2 funding bids, and that was really the sort of the big change, if you like, from a community led project to a more formal charitable organisation. So that was really the start of Links Digital, and from there we can sort of move forward and look at the more specific projects. So yeah, good morning everybody, and thank you for joining us. As we've just been discussing, that this project's funded by TED, and we would just like to get a little bit of feedback about the content and how you found things that we've been doing over the last few weeks and how the online services have affected you. So I'm going to just pop around my screen, and if you'd just like to say a few words. So I'll come to Anne first from Links Digital.
So as everybody knows, I'm Anne from Links Digital, so I manage the project from the point of view that all the paperwork, everything, all the tedious bits that need to go back to TED, etc. But also I'm very hands-on in dealing with people all the time. And if you phone, email, etc., it's always me you speak to, and I deal with all the day-to-day queries of the project.
Thank you. And I come over to Jean.
I found this most helpful because it's been I've attended both face-to-face and the internet. I prefer the face-to-face and the meeting of people, but this has been extremely helpful, and it's been so helpful because it's been so simply put over to us, and we've also had the feedback afterwards in the paper form, which has helped me tremendously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. Across to Graham.
Right. Good morning, Ted. I'm Graham. I found the course very useful. It's been useful in the respect that it's filled in quite a lot of gaps, because I'm obviously I'm self-taught in using an iPad. I've had it for several years, and there are gaps. There have been gaps, and I found it very helpful. So thank you very much, Rick and Anne, and over to the next client.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Across to you, Sally.
I found this very, very helpful, and I hope they go on doing it especially for my age group, because it's absolutely essential to be able to use your iPad and Zoom. We've learned about Zooming has been enormously helpful. And I recommend it to anybody. I think when you're my age, things go in one ear and come out the other. And so constant repetition is very helpful. And even when you think you know it all, you find your iPad playing up and you can't get through. And I've had sort of battles with mine, and I found Richard and Anne have been so encouraging, and our questions aren't too stupid, and you feel you can say what's really bothering you. And I'm very grateful. Many, many thanks.
You're very welcome, and thank you, Sally. And I understand it's also helped you with some other groups. You join the church Zoom meetings, don't you, and some of your
Yes.
other organisations?
Yes, that's right.
So, yeah, that's
and
fantastic.
I Zoom bridge in Alaska and Massachusetts.
Superb.
And that it enables you to see your family who live the other side of the world.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Excellent. I'm pleased you've enjoyed it. Thank you. And if I could come across to Robin now.
Right, hi. Yes, being a fairly competent user of a computer, one does say, why am I on the course? But no matter what you think, you always learn something. And Links Digital actually have given me a better insight into the use of my pad, and I feel more confident with it now. There were certain elements which I wasn't aware of. I've also learned how to use Zoom properly now, which was something which I wasn't really handling correctly, but I know it now. And I would like to thank you for both you and Anne for the work that you put into this, and may it long continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin, and also thank you to you, because we also learn things as well, because we do what we think people know, and obviously with you being a bit more advanced, some of the questions that you've put forward, and there's a couple of queries we've got or answers for this morning. It's been beneficial to us to add some extra bits into there that we maybe wouldn't have covered, so it's appreciated as both ways. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Brilliant. And across to Jeffrey.
Oh, right. Just really echoing what everyone else has said. Useful course, especially for our age group, and very well run. Appreciated.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Thank you. And yeah, it's good to have you along. And with you being, this is, I think, the first one you've attended of our session. So yeah, it's great to meet you. Thank you. And across to Netta.
Oh, yes, I've thoroughly enjoyed the course. I'm afraid Robin usually helps me out with my queries, but it's enabled me to be able to do my prescriptions online, which before I found I was unable to do before properly, and it has saved me so much time. Thank you.
I guess we'd call it normal project delivery for the start of the Commission services was to deliver community-based learning sessions. We picked a number of various venues, usually consisted of village halls or church halls, depending on the village or the town we were going to. We would go along there and set up a mobile classroom, which would consist of either laptops, iPads, tablets, with the projector and the screen up, so that everybody could see the things we were showing them, and each individual had their own device to actually practice on. We preferred to keep sessions the same, so either all laptop or all iPad. We found that was much easier for the people who were attending. They got more out of it because they were learning about their device or the device they were looking at purchasing, and if need be, we would duplicate that same content on, say, laptop, for example, if we'd got another group of people requiring the same information. And we found that was the best way forward. We'd done it in various ways, but that seemed to work for us, and we were getting the best feedback from individuals. The content that we covered, we would always start with an online safety aspect. We found that was important. We find most fears of people about the digital devices or going online is, oh, my personal details are going to be stolen, I'm going to lose money, I'm going to be hacked, my computer's going to get a virus. So it's really trying to put those worries at ease for people and just explain to them with some sensible sort of rules, follow the correct procedures, and don't do anything I guess that you wouldn't do offline, don't give your password away, etc. We would encourage people to work their way through that. So that was always our starting point. Alongside that, we also included scams, both online and offline, anything that we were aware of at the time. And we'd had a good relationship with the local PCSOs and also the scam awareness. So we would also always integrate those into that first session. Beyond that, we would look at keeping in touch with people, Now, at the time, we hadn't heard of Zoom. It wasn't something that was familiar with people. So we were looking at Skype and FaceTime, things that tended to be on people's phones or pads, tablets, as a normal day-to-day piece of software. And we also included email, another sort of popular method of keeping in touch. Beyond that, we would look at an awareness of financials, so online banking, insurance, utilities, ways that using online would allow you to save money or possibly get a better deal, you know, for products you were buying. We would also look at doing a grocery shop with one of the major supermarkets. We would go through the registration process with them, show them how to do a shop and arrange their delivery and payment, so that it made people in a position where even if they didn't want to use it all the time, they knew that it was there, you know, in case of an emergency or bad weather, not feeling too well, they could drop into an online shop if need be. And at that time, obviously, we'd no idea what was about to happen and how online would sort of take over most people's day-to-day. Alongside that, we would look at things like media, so catch-up TV, music, video, books online, all the things that people probably didn't realise they could do with their devices. So we would go through all those particular areas. We also included the Amazon Alexa and looked at the Echo products of how they could help in a sort of safety situation. You know, as long as you can shout out and talk to it, you can make a phone call, get some help. And if they wanted to take it as far as connecting electrical devices, you could turn on a lamp, turn off a lamp, and control it from wherever you are. So we'd always do a sort of a demo session and let people have a play with those. And that was also quite a good thing to get people interactive, and where they maybe wouldn't have wanted to go online or thought it wasn't for them, we found that was quite a turning point for quite a number of people. So alongside all of these, we would also encourage people to, you know, ask questions. We'd also always cover topics they wanted to cover, you know, just to make them feel that we were delivering what they wanted rather than just a set package. We always prefer to work our content around the individual. So you may come to one session and we cover one thing and another session is completely different because it depends on the group. And that's how we've always preferred to work and found that to be successful. So alongside all of the delivery and the learning, there's a social aspect, which was really key, especially to the TED groups, getting people out and about, mixing with each other, making new friends, establishing old friendships, and also that we found that this was benefiting other groups, and often groups that we were seeing were going to other members of the Commission services. So, for example, a lot of the people we saw also went to Marco's groups and would be talking about those. So it was quite a mixed bag of people that were coming along. So that was what we class our normal activity at the start of the project. And then towards the end of the year, coronavirus came along, and we had the problem that we were partway through some delivery when we had to stop and we went into lockdown. Obviously, we were hoping it wouldn't be too long and we'd be able to resume and get back to those community groups. But obviously, that wasn't meant to be. So partway through, we had a call or an email from Amy saying that the National Lottery were prepared to re-look at the contracts so that as organisations we could carry on and we wouldn't lose funding, etc. And it just meant we would have to look at a new method of reaching out to those people for what we were hoping a short period of time. We were asked to look at what we thought we could do, and with some negotiation we would decided we would produce some how-to guides. So we did a number of these in booklet format that could be printed, or there were links on the TED website, and there's a number of other ones on our own website. So it's a step-by-step, sort of screen-by-screen of how to do different subjects. The Zoom guide, I think, is the most popular, and that's been used worldwide by different organisations. Came as a shock to ourselves, but people can follow that through and install Zoom and hopefully know how to use it, or enough to get them into a learning session. And towards the end of the year, we started developing some more virtual learning sessions, trying to bring groups back together and encourage them to go online back in a group format. Really, we were looking at that time getting groups prepared to come out of COVID, because we thought it was going to happen sooner than it has, and get people working together again. So that really brings us to more towards the current time and how we're looking at moving forward into the coming year 7 and beyond. Because obviously the TED project will end at year 7, but we hope some of the things that we've put in place and the other commission services will continue long beyond that. I've already mentioned sort of year 7 and what we're doing. We're 3/4 of the year booked already with virtual sessions. We're hoping that we'll be towards later in the year, we'll be able to get back out and about in the community again. Even when we do that, we still think we need to, or not think, we will include a virtual aspect to that. We found that the virtual sessions have allowed some people that maybe wouldn't have gone out in the community the opportunity to join in. And we foresee that a bonus going forward. So we think we'll do more blended sessions. So there'll probably be let's say an 8-week session. We maybe would do some in the community, have a break, do a couple of weeks virtual, go back to the community to iron out any problems, and then do a virtual finish, so that we're inclusive of everybody. And we foresee that being the way forward, as things progress. Thank you for listening to us, and we would like to take this opportunity to thank all the digital champions that we've trained and the work they're doing, the many volunteers that we see at venues when we're out and about, and those who have been able to assist while we've been online. And obviously that's been more difficult, but we hope to see those that we out in the community as soon as possible. And finally, to all those people, we call them learners, and other people may call them clients, members or whatever, but to all of our learners that we've helped over the period of the TED project, we thank you for your time, and we've enjoyed meeting everyone. So thank you for listening, and if there's any questions, please get in touch. Many thanks.
So thank you for that. We are going to start, this is a recorded video, so we are going to start this video, but we are then going to pause at about a minute to midday, where I will obviously just bring it to everybody's attention that we're going to observe the minute silence. And then at the end of the silence, I'll end it by saying thank you. So we will start this video, but we will pause it at a minute to midday.
Hello, my name is Lizzie and I work for Magna Vitae, and this is Marco.
Hello, everybody.
So just a little bit about our organisation to start with. So Magna Vitae is a not-for-profit charitable trust, and we're based in East Lindsey in Lincolnshire, and we are set up to deliver health, wellbeing, leisure and cultural activities in East Lindsey. Marco and I work in the community team. And we work on a group of various projects. So we're here today to talk to you a little bit more in depth about the projects that are funded by TED in East Lindsey. So first of all, Marco, one of your projects you work on is called Fitness, Food and Friends. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that, Lindsay. Yeah, so Fitness, Food and Friends started probably about 2017. And it was set up as a 12-week block of activity to move around different towns and villages in East Lindsey to help people to prevent isolation, loneliness, to keep people well physically, mentally, and in the age group really of the 50 plus. So Erica, my colleague, and myself took that out as what we call our little road show to many different areas where we've been now, and some great interaction, some great relationships from that. And to begin with, we would do a range of activities. Eric would concentrate on the exercise. She'd be able to answer people's questions on my bad back or my hip hurts, what exercise should I do? And I would bring in my sort of background, food. So we do some cooking together. We would talk about areas that are big problem areas for a lot of people, like diabetes, losing weight, anything like that. And then more in recent years, when it was commissioned, we increased its variety. So we brought in more people from different backgrounds to deliver things on more diverse scale. So maybe the digital side of things, maybe homing in more on the mental health side of things, so that we had a very diverse exercise, diet, wildlife watching, digital awareness and things like that. And that's where we're up to at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And that as a package is just wonderful, isn't it? Because
absolutely,
it is. And I also sometimes find with Fitness, Food and Friends, it is what it says on the tin, isn't it? Like it really is. But to explain in a sentence what the project actually does for people is quite difficult. Not difficult, complex, but
yeah,
it's so much more.
Absolutely. And I think as well, what I've described to you all is pretty much before COVID.
Yeah.
Obviously, once COVID hit, we were in the middle of doing 2 strands. So we were in Sutton-on-Sea and we were in Binbrook at the time. So both obviously had to shut. And like you were describing, Lizzie, earlier there, we had to go then to the wellbeing calls. We had to start producing content for our Facebook community pages so that those that were online could start to interact with the Facebook pages. So that could have been quizzes, me doing some recipes, yourselves doing some exercises, Dan's routines, etc., which was really well received. Then the next layer after that, we were trying to get some people maybe down the road of using a Zoom or something like that. But it did open my eyes that this was going to be quite a bit of work, because most people at the time, so I'm talking early first lockdown, hadn't even heard of that. So we were using guides written by people like Links Digital, who had written some excellent guides on Zoom that we could send over to people and try to encourage them onto things like that. And it did take a while. It wasn't an easy thing. And obviously some people were quite resistant to that. But as the months went on, we were able to do little things like you mentioned, some doorstep visits, taking little well-being packs out, the Christmas packs, which were very well received. And then in more recent times, we've been developing some Zoom and some virtual Facebook rooms sessions. So that's at Alford, and also the groups we did have originally in Sutton and Binbrook, we've amalgamated them to 1 Zoom a week, and it's nice to see more and more of them are coming on board with that. So it has been quite a change. If you look back at the very beginning, wow, it's a very different picture now in terms of delivery.
Absolutely, and I think that obviously it's great that Fitness, Food and Friends is a 12-week project, because it means that we can travel. You can travel around East Lindsey, working with as many people as possible. But this virtual offer has meant that actually, if somebody really enjoyed the 12-week course, but actually feels like they want to know more, or they maybe missed a week or whatever, because it's virtual, they can actually join like the next block, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. And it's something I was thinking about the other day. I was sort of comparing in my mind going along to a physical session at a village hall, the people we had, and now comparing now and thinking to myself, yeah, people can follow us around. They can pick and mix, if you like. What are they going to talk about today? Yeah, I think I'll drop in on that. No, I'm not too interested in that. And it's a much more different feel to it. Is it better? Is it worse? I don't think it's either. It's different. There are definitely positives to it for some people. And many people I'm thinking about who can't get out of the house or will be limited to the time, are benefiting hugely now.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I think that's something that as an organisation we're going to be mindful of in the future, because it's been we've realised how important it is to be, and how inclusive the digital offer really is. Brilliant. So I'm just going to
Okay, so we've just paused the video to, now we're now going to mark the 1-year anniversary as the first day of lockdown by observing 1 minute silence, and then I'll bring it to a close once we have observed that minute silence. Thank you for observing a 1-minute silence.
Have a little chat about chaps. Sorry, my cat's in the background now. I'm gonna have a little chat about chaps. So chaps started again, I think it was in 2017, and it was quite a different project from the project that it is now. So it was similar to Marco's Fitness Food and Friends in the sense that it was 12-week blocks of activity for men over 50 in East Lindsey. So we did things like badminton, we did cookery with men, specifically cookery classes for men, which Marco delivered. We did a session called Platform 50, which was based at Station Sports Centre, and that was to encourage men over 50 to go along to the gym. They basically got 2 hours free with a lifestyle consultant, which they helped them kind of achieve the goals they wanted to achieve, tackle the issues they wanted to tackle. Yeah, so that's how it worked. When we were recommissioned by TED to do chaps in a slightly different way, it was around kind of sport nostalgia, and we weren't really sure what it was going to look like to start with. We knew we wanted to do something around sport nostalgia. It was basically kind of around pub games, around maybe some singing, that you know, sports songs, things like that. And what we ended up doing was we set up a breakfast club in Mablethorpe and a sporting memories type session in Skegness, which was affiliated with Sporting Memories, which is a charity that bases their work around sport nostalgia. And I don't know if you'll agree with me, Marco, but it was a bit of a slow start. It was tricky to get men to come along. And it was kind of, we're all a little bit puzzled, I guess. Yeah, because Marco, you might want to share a bit of an experience with that.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it was new. Men are generally, obviously I am a man, so I know, I'm more cautious. What's in it for me? What will they do? What will I get out of it? That sort of thing. So yes, it was a bit of a slower start, but those that were coming along were clearly engaging. They were clearly very committed, and we both sensed that it didn't need that much longer, and it was going to grow, I think, quite quickly. But as we know, the lockdown came, so that put all of that to one side, unfortunately. And then when that started to happen, obviously we had the people from the Skegness group. We'd already made contact with some people from Mablethorpe, so they were ready and waiting. So we had these people already. What are you going to do? So we then realised there were a number of other projects, such as the Men Do project from Carers First, who were just for men, and a lot of their delivery was centred around going to places and interacting with others, which obviously had to stop straight away. So we spoke to them and just said, well, we've got this particular project, we're going to take it online or telephone conferencing, and to make them fun groups, quizzes around sport, maybe that would be something that the men you support might be interested in as well. So the men on their database, a lot of them did want to be involved. People we already interacted with, there were some from Befrienders as well. So we ended up with quite a number of men that we then decided to try and split up into small groups of, say, 4 to 5, and sort of position them throughout the week that was suitable to them, and have like an hour little chat around sport. They all began on telephone conferencing. There weren't any in the group who were all exclusive Zoom users.
No.
There were only 1 or 2. That was it. But I must admit, it did go better than I thought. And people were coming back after 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They were still there and on the month's road. And I thought, wow, I didn't expect to be such a commitment, that people are rushing home from work, or they're fitting their outings or whatever around it. So it started to show me that. And on top of that, we started to post them the little, the sporting pink from the Sporting Memories Foundation. That came in the post, and we put on there a little question that would be linked to the personal club or team or sport they followed, which did give a lot of interaction, more than I expected. When people were phoning me and texting me about the answers, I could tell that it's something they appreciated. We started to post a weekly sporting memory quiz on our Facebook page. I film myself, answer some questions, give a bit of interaction, so a bit of familiarity. We appreciated not that many were yet online. That was a work in progress, with encouragement and some support from Links Digital and sending out Zoom guys and Facebook and explaining all of that. More of them did start to come on board. So if I fast track it, we have now got several Zoom groups, which if you told me that at the beginning, I thought that would never happen.
No.
But it has. So it's a lovely mixture now of some of the Zoom, some of the telephone conferencing, but a real camaraderie and a real sense of they know each other. They ask if one of them's not there, how are they doing? So yeah, it's really surprised me.
Good. And I think I'd just like to add as well on that these men don't know each other necessarily. So some of them know each other in the little groups. They might have went to school together, or they might have been to the Skegness group together, but mainly they don't know each other. And I think that's amazing. And I also think as well, and this is something that we've talked about, Marco, is the sense of identity, and that we kind of feel that we've been stripped of our identity. I like going to the theatre, obviously that's something I can't do, and there's so many things we can't do that make us who we are, that actually for these men, this pandemic has done that to them, but actually their situations pre-pandemic, so maybe their health or their financial circumstance or whatever it might be, has maybe stripped them of that identity a little bit. And this project has definitely given them some of that identity back. And just from some of the comments we've received, and like you say, Marco, people answering questions that you've put in their post and they've just texted you it just shows how important these clubs are to them, and the work that we've done during COVID, really. Well, the work that you've done has really, given them that sense of community back and identity.
That's a good point, and I'm glad you reminded me of that, because I think that's probably one of the key areas I found, identity. Early on, a lot of them very down, lots of mental health struggling. I'm not saying that's all gone, but what I am saying is there's a real acknowledgement of each other in the group, what sport they like, what badge they wear for what team. So we sort of picked up on this when we did their Christmas packs, and we tried to find a little quiz book or fact book about their club or sport, and a lot of feedback from that. For example, one chap, I remember on the phone telling me when he unwrapped it, he went, "Oh my goodness, it's an Aston Villa sports quiz book." And he started to explain to me, I've not been to the Villa for donkey's years, and it brought back a memory of what it was like to sit in the Villa crowd and win, although that must have been quite a rare moment. But all of a sudden, it was something much bigger than his little house in Mablethorpe where he struggled a bit. He was now part of something worldwide, because there's Villa fans worldwide, you believe. And another example would be, I got a Sheffield Wednesday card for Christmas for one individual, and on the front was the back of the shirt, and we got a number 3 put on there with his surname. And he was quite emotional about that, because he said, "Wow, you remembered when I was a young guy playing football for the Sheffield United amateurs, and I was number 3. And that card will stay up when all the others have gone."
Oh, that's such amazing attention to detail, though, from you as a facilitator. But also, it's really, I think we often think big, don't we? What huge differences can we make to these people? Which is obviously great, but actually it is those small attention to detail things that really do make an impact. And these men then trust you, because they don't know who you are. At the end of the day, you're just somebody on the end of the phone. So
you're right, yeah, because you'll know this, when we took the parcels out, you would knock on someone's door, they would open the door. They haven't seen me because they're not a Zoom group. I haven't seen them. I only know their voice. And the times I had, "Well, you're not what I thought you'd look like." To which I felt sorry to disappoint you. There was that linking in, and that it was almost like we knew each other, but we've not seen each other. So that's
just wonderful. And I just think it's one of those projects that as great as it was before and the potential that it had before, I feel like COVID really has improved that project and really shown what it is about and should be about.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in there as well, I think it also shows what you alluded to earlier, that through the COVID and the way we're doing it, we have got people who we wouldn't ordinarily have had. People who clearly cannot leave their house. I mean, I've got a guy who takes the call, often laid out on his bed because of his bad back. Another chap whose mobility is very poor and there's no one to bring him. So yeah, it shows you that moving forward, we definitely have to think about if we want to reach some of the most people who are struggling the most, then we have to be more creative as we've become in our delivery.
Yeah. And now we know about them, and now we know about their circumstance. When we do get some face-to-face delivery, we now know that actually there might be something we can put in place to help, you know, or when we're going for new funding or whatever, it might be that we include something in it, or yeah, definitely. But we wouldn't have known if it wasn't for this. So yeah, definitely. That's great. So just going back to Fitness, Food and Friends then, Marco. So Fitness, Food and Friends has been recommissioned by TED. CHAPS hasn't, so CHAPS is staying with MV Community Team, and we're looking at ways in which to get funding to continue that. But so Fitness, Food and Friends then, what does that look like moving forward?
Right, so moving forward at the moment, of course, we cannot access the village halls and things like that. There were a brief window of time we had last, I'd say around August, September, when things were looking good, and we did start planning out a number of going back to various places, which we did do a few, but then of course it all went shut again. So at the moment, it's all done virtually. So we have a group via the Zoom each week from the people of Binbrook and Sutton, and we're still getting referrals into that, which is great. We have another group online with the Alford Hub, which meets weekly, one of their virtual rooms. And last week we had Tai Chi. So there's quite a good mixture there. Some people who've been originally to other groups, some people from Alford, and some people who are clearly from even further out in East Lindsey are attending that. And we're currently having conversations with Hogsthorpe Community Hub to see if we can also do something a little bit similar, because there's obviously quite a keenness in that area as well. So that's where it is at the moment. When things get unlocked, I'd like to think that there would be some physical chance to get back in a village hall, as well as doing what we're doing here.
Brilliant.
So that's pretty much where we're up to.
Brilliant. No, that sounds good. And again, it encompasses the face-to-face, because that's what a lot of people have missed, but it also is inclusive to people that might be either nervous to get out again, which is completely understandable, or are unable to. So, and
also just remembering our All Together project, we've been able to support a lot of people, haven't we, in our different projects, to get online. So a number of people I can just think about from CHAPS, Still Me, Fitness, Food and Friends, who have taken us up on obtaining a tablet, getting it all formatted by Links Digital, and then we can supply that to them, and then they can get some help and training from Links Digital as well. So it's been really good, particularly when we hear feedback of they're getting on well with it, they've started Skyping with it, they're joining a Zoom group with it. That's a really good result.
Ideal. Yes. Fabulous. So I think that is all from us at Magna Vitae community at the moment. Is that all right with you, Marco?
One of the things just popped into my head.
Yeah,
I think it's, first of all, the power of a conversation, which we all know that, but it's worth saying. But the second one, the power of a story. Now, a lot of the people that we support often have stories they want to share. Often they hold back because they think, well, nobody will be bothered. But when they do share it, every time, somebody gets something out of it.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't have to be something incredible. It can be something normal. But I do find that when people vocalize or share like that, there's always someone who's encouraged by it. So.
Oh yeah, and I think that again is kind of credit to you and how you sort of facilitate those conversations as well. because it's just encouraging, isn't it, for other people? So
It's really encouraging, yeah. So
definitely.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Well, thank you for that. And I hope that that's been beneficial. So we'll see you later from us.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
So those videos are obviously really inspiring to hear firsthand what some of our TED delivery partners are doing. I'd now like to introduce you to Hayden Bird, who is our TED Learning and Evaluation Officer, to talk us through where are we now and perhaps some of the learning that we've managed to collate over the past 6 years. Over to you, Hayden.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Today I'm going to be presenting on programme learning since 2015, and I'll be reflecting on some of the core findings that the TED team has reported on. Our findings are grounded in the experiences of people aged 50 and over in the district, as well as the wider stakeholders that work with them. So I'll just give a bit more of a detailed overview of the presentation. Firstly, I'm going to just cover some of the stuff that Liz has mentioned in our earlier presentation about background to Ageing Better Learning activity, and I'll focus on national and also local learning. I'll then go on to make some overarching observations about TED's journey of changes. And this will present 5 key learning shifts that we've experienced during the programme. And following this, I'll focus more definitively on one of our learning reports, which has been published recently, and this is on services provided in the sector. And I'll talk about the 3 themes that were covered in that report. It will look back not only on the experiences of the TED programme, but also hopefully signpost some kind of where next indicators for the programme activity and services. So whilst COVID-19 is the setting, it is also appreciating the so what and the what next scenarios as we move into year 7 a bit deeper. And I'll finish by providing a few links to both national and local learning resources, as well as also talking about future learning topics that we're hoping to report on or produce outputs on. So if we go to that slide, as has been covered by others, Ageing Better programme is one of 5 National Lottery Community Fund programmes that has a test and learn approach to service delivery. The National Lottery Community Fund, as Liz mentioned earlier, has a national lead partner for evaluation, which is Ecorus. And TED is one of 14 local programmes. Across all these localities, the common measurement framework is applied and collects data on all programmes in a standardised way. And in addition to some of the national evaluation, across each locality there is a local learning lead, and for TED, this is me, and my role is employed through the Health Advancement Research team at the University of Lincoln. And learning leads collate and disseminate thematic learning in a number of ways, and this includes learning reports, video features, presentations and other outputs. In the context of TED, this includes reports that draw on data that has been obtained from case studies, interviews, surveys and good news stories and contract monitoring information data, the latter particularly in the case of our commissioned services. In the context of local programmes then, the local learning role integrates learning aspects with service design and development in a test and learn approach. And this can be thought of as a kind of action research. So we look at having components of observing, acting, and also reflecting on what has taken place. And alongside that kind of iterative process is an interface between learning and research on the one hand and ongoing frontline delivery of services on the other. And both the local and national aspects of learning also intersect with each other. And this can be seen in some of the reports and resources that I'll give links to at the end. So across Ageing Better, the pandemic has also created some real challenges for ageing populations, and as well as the wider stakeholders who engage with them. And the next slide is going to reflect on these 2 distinct eras in the programme by highlighting some of the learning topics and outputs which are covered here both before and during COVID-19. So learning topics and the language initially pre-COVID focused on loneliness and the needs and challenges of engaging ageing populations in the district. But early in programme inception, we also responded to CMF data that highlighted the under-engagement of certain populations, such as LGBTQ+ populations, and also men in our service deliveries. And we've just heard a bit about the CHAPS project, for instance. And in exploring these issues, we also recognise the importance of taking into account East Lindsey's rural and coastal makeup. And this was to really nuance our understanding of the communities that we were engaging with and working with. And I'll speak a little bit about how we use this kind of interface later on when I talk about ideas of adaptation in the sector. But pre-COVID, the TED programme and learning kind of mirrored a getting out and getting together ethos as a way of meeting the aims and objectives of ageing better in reducing loneliness and isolation, but also increasing participation, as well as recognising the value and the contribution that old people make to society, particularly people aged 50 and over. And this is reflected, as we've heard earlier, in the Age Friendly Business Award. Our learning subsequently is reflected on the challenges that COVID-19 has brought, but how there can be longer term implications for engaging communities. For instance, our resilience report focused on the crucial role of relationships between individuals, different parts of communities and wider stakeholders. And we identified 4 key themes as enablers for developing and sustaining these relationships. And we've heard about some of these thematic areas earlier today: the role of ongoing person-centered flexible services in bringing different stakeholders together, but also reaching people who conventionally would have been labelled hard to reach, even though we found that people have engaged readily when the service offers are right. We've also focused on the role of activities and how these are important as a collaborative resource. And we've also found that this has been a key way in to facilitate broader community development and co-design. We've also focused in this report on the thematic learning of a local awareness and credibility, particularly of providers in the community, and how they have existing buy-in and how this is capitalised on. And finally, the report also recognised the growing role of digital inclusions in relationships, as well as developing individual skills. We then went on to explore digital inclusion during COVID-19 a bit deeper. And these really highlighted some of the thematic areas that related to people's engagement in digital inclusion. They included the importance of virtually replicating the togetherness that models of pre-COVID provision had. And we've just seen some examples in the kind of online services that CHAPS and Fitness, Food and Friends, as well as our other delivery partners, have created. We also looked at how promoting enjoyment in activities was a core draw for people to becoming more digitally engaged. And this included, for instance, focusing on activities, realising the importance that enjoyment has rather than necessarily upskilling for skills' sake. We also looked at, alongside the enjoyment in activities, about how champions could be utilised to kind of promote the benefits of digital inclusion. And we've heard about that earlier today from Links Digital, particularly the role of peer converts, people who have moved from being offline to online and really experienced firsthand the benefits of it being digitally included. More recently, we've looked at ideas about adaptation in the sector, which I'll move on to in the second half of this presentation. But briefly, when we talk of the sector, we refer to organisations, communities, and the wider stakeholders who work with and/or engage with people aged 50 and over, and provide a range of services. This includes, but is not limited to, the VCS, the statutory sector, and private sector providers. And it also applies to services that are provided by both employed staff and, importantly, also volunteers. and it draws on findings from the TED Age Friendly Business Award, and it also covers people who are age 50 and above themselves, not only providing services, but also simultaneously being users of services. And TED also has a couple of forthcoming reports, including a report on a telephone contact befriending, and also a section dedicated to rural and coastal communities in a national Ageing Better co-production toolkit that's been engages Ageing Better partners in the localities nationally. But before I focus on adaptation, I just want to highlight some test and learn shifts really that overarch the topics in this slide. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So if we're thinking about TED's journey of change, we can define 5 shifting sands, both in how we think about engaging with older ageing populations, but also in how we actually engage with them. The first 2 points on this slide are really closely related. As the project has progressed and diversified, including during COVID-19, we've moved from working in communities or for communities to working with them. And this relates to our second point. This is shown by our initial co-production approach, whereby we feature the formally defined strategic oversight of the programme by people aged 50 and over themselves. But we have now shifted subsequently during a live course to working and engaging with people at a grassroots level. And this sometimes subtle difference can be characterised by working with people through frontline services and also co-facilitating activities. This approach has meant that people who were really considered hard to reach have really readily engaged and overcome the barriers of that stereotype. Our learning also has increasingly recognised the importance of activities in bringing people together, both in place-based and indeed remote forms. Third, and linking to this, is the recognition that stereotypes of ageing populations and their services create barriers to engagement. And this is even when they're intended to be well-meaning and positive, for instance, looking at people as vulnerable and needing services. Our research, along with our research partners at the University of Lincoln, have also found that people who engage with TED aren't drawn to our services as a result of their age or a perceived vulnerability. They don't self-identify or want to be considered as lonely, isolated, and most certainly elderly. In short, vibrancy really covers the people we engage with, as well as the services and activities that we offer to them. Fourthly, as we move into year 7 of the programme, TED Learning has shown how dedicated resource can lead to sustainable relationships and networks. Some examples here include dedicated staff on different aspects of the programme, supporting the development of friendship groups, and promoting the Age Friendly Business Award further, as well as the work of our really dedicated delivery partners in developing specialist projects. And going forwards, our reporting will continue to reflect on this shift, highlighting best practice. Given the above shifts, getting together is really an important part of TED's legacy, but doing together also has a crucial role in how we come to recognise, and this includes recognising some of those issues that I've already mentioned, particularly with LGBTQ+ and male populations. As part of the Where We Are Now focus of this presentation, I'd like to use the next part just to provide some further reflections on how the sector has adapted, both in light of these shifting sands, but also as a result of COVID. And in this sense, more focus will be on providing services than necessarily looking directly at impact. And if we move to the next slide, please, I'll briefly introduce an outline definition of adaptation. So really, why choose adaptation as resilience as a concept for our starting point? Well, we've seen in prior TED reports that resilience has a bouncing back or moving on from adversity element. And with adaptation, our focus can really be more positive potentially, in that services can adapt and innovate even when there is no adversity or austerity in place. and it can be both reactive as well as being proactive. Adaptation's also really featured in domains of criminology and sociology, particularly concerning how people adapt in the context of power and place. But the definition, I think, in this slide really captures the essence of adaptation for the TED programme and our data collection. So the three core themes that emerged that chime with this definition of the slide are some of the issues that I'm going to go into in the next few slides. And if we move to the next slide, we can explore the first theme, which concerns appreciating needs as well as preferences as drivers for adaptation and how these can be fluid. But firstly, profiling community needs as well as people's preferences and how organisational characteristics look can be fraught with a number of complexities, and these have been documented with regards to the VCS and indeed criminal justice system. These issues can include capturing real-time data in these fast-changing landscapes and presence of knowledge management issues which relate to similar snapshot exercises taking place at the same time, which can arguably lead to a contradictory evidence base. Nonetheless, appreciating needs and preferences as well as mapping services remain key drivers of service adaptation in the context of TED programme and the changing landscapes of delivery that I've gone on to highlight. The iterative test and learn approach provides a key way of exploring our communities, and this has provided a really informal but important evidence base in shaping services as we go forward. During COVID-19, this approach is integral to working with people aged 50 and over, and other profiling exercises that have undertaken less frequently would probably not have given us the insight that the programme's developed. And I'm thinking around issues such as like joint strategic needs assessments here. Although East Lindsey is not ethnically diverse, as other areas in the Ageing Better programme nationally, we recognise that what works in some of our inland market towns does not necessarily mean the model can be patched across and applied to some of our coastal communities, such as Skegness and some of the coastal villages. And some of this is really highlighted in the quotes from the multi-agency programme management group members in this slide. The PMG gives strategic oversight of the TED programme, and we have also reflected on this in written evidence to an inquiry on loneliness. TED was subsequently invited to produce oral evidence to parliamentarians as a result of our initial report to them. During COVID-19, developing services at distance that include one-to-one services has also led to the programme engaging with people who may not have wanted or been able to attend group or place-based activities. So this has given insight into potentially hidden needs. Whilst the evidence base is really challenging, there's been increasing recognition that the demand for services and the ability to sustain or develop these as short-term funding opportunities emerge have been possible. This intersects with our next theme. So if we move to the next slide, I'll talk a bit about how services can respond rapidly, but also plan ahead, even in these fast-changing landscapes. So as the pandemic and government measures transpired, TED, like many other Ageing Better partners, were really able to consider how service offers could be adapted. And some of this has come about as a result of the flexibility of the National Lottery Community Fund. This was really crucial in enabling innovation, not just in the context of the YMCA TED team, but also our partners and wider stakeholders. And it really reinforced the significance of Ageing Better's original aims of tackling loneliness, but also recognising the contribution of older people to society. Secondly, COVID's invariably led to an immediate and short-term context of challenges, which organisations, groups, businesses, and our wider communities have responded to. And some of this additional work that has happened from these changing delivery methods is shown in our our quote from Citizens Advice Lindsey. But paradoxically, in this pressurized context, real innovation has taken place. And we have seen this mirrored also in recent plans to reform NHS about kind of local collaboration. So alongside these different changes in the way of working, we also had systems and processes that rapidly developed alongside these. For instance, we developed the connected befriending phone service, and this included TED members acting as befrienders in addition to holding pre-COVID responsibilities. The team devised specific Excel workbooks with dedicated staff phone numbers for a breakdown of areas in the district. And we logged callers' consent for general data protection purposes. And this has also allowed an audit trail of call summaries, which enabled the team to do follow-up conversations and give a sense of continuity to the people that we were contacting. It's also enabled us to kind of create an informal evidence base about the patterns of needs within individuals and the cohort as a whole. And this kind of relates to some of the issues that I talked about on the previous slide when I mentioned needs and the demand aspect that I talked about. The last quote on this slide also highlights that innovation was present across the sector and within a kind of a collaborative impulse to meet the challenges of community sensitivity and providing ongoing blended delivery. If we could just go to the next slide, please. So, in the past two slides, I flagged up what I call community sensitivity. And this is a challenge and an opportunity. It concerns how we appreciate people's ongoing needs in an ongoing nature, what we would call the demand aspect, but also how services can adapt by working in short-term and uncertain contexts, whilst also realising the benefits and implications for future delivery. During the pandemic, our collaborative work has been increasingly relevant in meeting this challenge and has taken the form of formal partnerships between providers and also informal relationships. For instance, stakeholders working with people informally on a day-to-day basis. But this has been made possible by the really embedded clear aims and objectives of Ageing Better that we've worked with since 2015. These principles have really continued to guide relationships, not only through formal mechanisms like some of our programme management group meetings and delivery partner meetings, but also the kind of feedback and on the day-to-day interaction with people in our communities. As is shown in the last quote from the CHAPS project, which you heard about when Lizzie and Marco spoke, this melding of work continues not just strategically, but really practically, and in this case with delivery partners integrating service offers. Finally, to finish on our focus of adaptation, TED as a programme has really continued to capitalise on the reputation and strengths of established stakeholders, as well as building new relationships within the district. These ongoing relationships are really significant in identifying and engaging with communities, not only now, but leading into the future. And if we move to my next slide, I'll just give some details about the next 6 months in relation to learning themes and reports. So I mentioned earlier that we were contributing to a national Ageing Better toolkit, which focuses on co-design and co-production. And we're going to be drawing on our learning about this grassroots engagement approach that we have taken. We'll also be considering the Age Friendly Business Award, how we might be diversified and how we can reflect on this in a dedicated report. Prior to a final project report, we will also be looking to produce an interim report that's reflecting on some of the issues I've talked about today. And we'll also be looking at how friendship groups have made achievements, but also how we can sustain the energy and diversity that these groups and their volunteers have brought. In my final slide, which gives detail of resources and contact details, I would also just like to link in to the 10-minute break following the presentation and where we'll reconvene. And the next speaker, Jane Burney, is going to be presenting on her work as a Principal Age-Friendly Officer for the TED programme in East Lindsey District Council. Thank you for listening, and I'll just go to the next slide, which has some resources and contact details. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayden. We are just very aware of timescales, so we're actually, if it's okay with you, going to, if possible, be back at literally just after 12:45. So we'll reconvene at 12:46, which gives us a bit of a quick 5-minute break, stand up, stretch, and then we've got some amazing speakers at the end of this. So if we can reconvene at 12:46, that would be great. Thank you.
So hi again, I'm Anne from Links Digital. So this afternoon we've got Damien joining us. Damien has done a digital champion training with us. So I just want to introduce you to Damien. Damien, do you just want to tell them a little bit about yourself? You're a carer, etc.
Yeah, my name's Damien. I'm a carer, help out a volunteer for Carers First. I look after my wife, Tracy. She's got physical disabilities and mental health disabilities. And yeah, I just look after her doing the daily chores.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I know what a great help you are to your wife. You're amazing. What made you want to be a digital champion?
When I was younger, I lived in Kent and I worked on computers for a company, doing all different bits and pieces, taking computers apart, loading software, etc. And then obviously I met my wife and things took a turn, and hadn't worked really on computers for many, many years. This opportunity came with Carers First to start helping the less fortunate people that can't use a computer. And I thought to myself, you know, how wonderful it would be if, but with my help, I can get someone online, you know, and get in touch with their families, etc. So I thought, fantastic, yes, go for it.
Absolutely brilliant. So obviously you've done quite a lot of training with ourselves. How did you find the training?
Really enjoyed the training, actually. Learned a lot. I mean, you gave some handy websites, you know, which I've had a look at, and I've had a go at all the different tasks on there. Learned absolutely loads, you know, as I've gone along myself. So yeah, I've been really enjoying it.
Building your own digital knowledge up as well, isn't it, of where to go to?
It is, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
So what's your experience like supporting people with digital?
As I say, in the past, I've got some friends which are slightly older, which I've helped out. You know, I've helped them get online. Haven't had a lot of experience myself with helping sort of people too much getting online, you know, just family members, friends, etc. But apart from that, you know, I've just gone ahead and just tried it myself with the training. So yeah.
And the people that you've actually been getting online, and how different have their needs been?
Oh, there's been a huge range of needs from each person that I've dealt with. I mean, I've had one person that's never touched a tablet before or a computer, to people that have got experience and have just got slight issues that they couldn't either use Zoom or they've got a software problem. Yeah, it's a huge range of differences, but each one I've looked into and I've learned things myself as I've gone along, and I keep doing it.
Brilliant. And I know what a difference you're making. You know, I hear the feedback and how brilliantly you do. I mean, you really are excellent at everything you're doing, helping everybody across Lincolnshire. What would you say to anyone who was thinking about becoming a digital champion and doing the training?
I would say go for it. I think it's very rewarding. Just to hear the feedback from some people. Say I've had a couple of people recently and they've told me how when I've not been online with them, they've been practicing and they've looked at this and looked at that. Another person told me how they'd gone online and found some sites and sent some emails. And I have to admit, it did make me feel happy to know that I've helped that person get online. So I think the rewards are fantastic. So go for it.
Thank you. Well, hopefully everybody's had a quick break as we want to continue to fit in, obviously, all of the rest of our speakers. I would now like to introduce you to Jane Burney, who is the age-friendly principal officer who you've probably heard about over the course of this event. Jane, it's over to you.
Hello, my laptop decided to dive as I was about to present. I, like Mo, have lockdown hair, so my hair's about 17 inches longer, but we can probably move on to the next slide and then we don't have to look at it. Okay, so I've noticed my name mentioned 3 or 4 times, so I best do a reasonable job of this, I think. I'm going to turn my video off because I do, like many of you, have very odd internet. And it just means it's less likely to do any popping out. So I shall go into the darkness and carry on. So as Mo referred to, we are all aging, and those of us on this call either are likely to live or work in East Lindsey. So an age-friendly assessment of the district is relevant to all of us. So as I'm doing my presentation, maybe just think about what you as an organisation or you as an individual might want to do to improve the age-friendliness of East Lindsey. So an age-friendly baseline assessment is being done in order for us to become part of the World Health Organization's global network of age-friendly communities. We are already a member of the UK network, which is run by the Centre for Aging Better. This baseline assessment was done mostly prior to COVID, the actual activities, but a lot of the desk-based research has been done since COVID. You will understand that the face-to-face activities had to be postponed and then cancelled as a result of COVID. So if we have the next slide, Becca, what I'd like to talk about is the process itself. So in order to complete the baseline assessment, which is not yet published but will be soon, it's a very big document. What we did was we had meetings with a range of agencies. So I met with managers and operational staff in agencies around the district. I did a lot of desk-based research. We had focus groups. What I did was I used already established groups like the TED friendship groups, Alzheimer's social groups, the Lincoln and Lindsey Blind Society, those sorts of groups. Went along to them where their group leaders were and they felt comfortable and did some kind of what's good about living in East Lindsey and what's not so good. I had one-to-one conversations with older people. And then I did something called walking audits, which, and they can be done for lots of reasons, but the reasons we did them was to look at the outdoor spaces and to see whether they were age friendly. And unfortunately, the majority of those had to be cancelled because they were scheduled in March and April last year, but we did get a few done. So we look at things like the pavements and obstacles and whether it's a pleasant surrounding, those sorts of things. And then we shared a survey with professionals, and professionals means people who work in organisations, elected members of the district council, town councils, parish councils, care homes, GP practices, all those sorts of things. Next slide, please, Becca. So the report itself, the World Health Organization does not set out how we structure the report. All that's required is that we measure ourselves against 8 domains, and I will talk about each of those very briefly in a moment. But the way that the report's structured is that we've done the normal introduction and summary, but we look at each of those domains in a little bit of detail, look at the research around each domain and what makes a good age-friendly community in regard to that domain. And then after that we've done the domains, we look at what's working well and what are the challenges, and we start to look at what we're going to do next. So if we want to move on to the next slide, we'll start talking about the first couple of domains. So I'm not going to read all of these statements because I'm assuming that you can see them and you'll read them yourself, but outdoor spaces and public buildings. So this is about the environment that we move about in, you know, the beaches, the pavements, the roads, those sorts of things, and also the public buildings. So any building that is designed for the public to access for whatever reason. What you will find is in each of the domains, I do a focus on something that is relevant to East Lindsey. So for this one of our very well established age-friendly businesses is the Hildred Shopping Centre in Skegness, and as well as the whole shopping centre being age-friendly, the majority of the units in there are also age-friendly businesses. So we've done a focus on that, and if you talk to a lot of the people who live in Skegness and shop in that centre, they would say that it's more of a community centre than just a shopping centre. And if you want to look at more of the information about that, you can go to the TED website, where we also look at the banter benches, which I think Hayden also had in one of his slides, where people can talk in a socially distanced manner with each other, and there are banter buddies who volunteer. So some of the things that came back from the focus groups about outside spaces in East Lindsey was that they were generally a lovely place to live, safe place to live, quieter, slower and more friendly. The next domain is transport. Now, I know living in a rural county, transport is always going to be an issue for people. And if you drive, it'll be potholes. But for those that don't drive or aren't able to drive or can't afford to run their car, the public transport and community transport are a big issue. We got a lot of conversations about that in focus groups. A lot of positive comments about Call Connect, which is the on-demand bus service. And so the focus in that domain is on Call Connect. Some of the feedback that we got about transport was the confusion about having multiple bus service provision. So there are quite a lot of bus service providers that cover East Lindsey. Bus timings, so that would affect people's ability to actually engage in activity. So they have to get a bus that arrives in a town an hour before their appointment or event, and then they have to hang around for a couple of hours afterwards. And then the other thing that was really big, especially on the coastal community, was the issue of transport and accessing health appointments. Lots of discussion about that in the focus groups, and the lack of equity of access to health as a result of transport issues. Next slide, please, Becca. Okay, so housing. Yes, it is about the building, but it's also about the accessibility. It's about whether or not there's support to live in the housing, whether or not there's aids and things like that. So we focused on the Wellbeing Link service, who do a fabulous service across the county. Lots of positive feedback about the work that they do. They work to support all adults who meet the criteria of their service, but the majority of their service users are over 50, and so kind of fulfill the age-friendly criteria. Interestingly, when we did the survey, approximately half of the respondents to the age-friendly survey expressed a lack of awareness about the availability of suitable accommodation and support services for older people. So what this suggests is that there's some awareness raising across sectors about what housing and related services are available. It doesn't mean that those services aren't there. It's more about other organisations raising their awarenesses of what there is. Social participation is the domain 4, and I really probably don't need to go into that because we've talked a lot about the TED Aging Better programme today, and the focus is on that in the report. But we do know that participating in social activities, from having a chat in the street with somebody that you you know, you see regularly when you walk your dog kind of thing, right the way through to formally organised social activities, are really important for people's physical and emotional well-being. Next slide, please, Becca. So respect and social inclusion, this refers to the opposite of ageism. So if you think about ageism, this is the opposite. It's about people feeling valued and respected. It's about, as you get older, being an individual and not being thought of as just one of those old people. The focus we have here is on the Age Proud campaign, which is a Centre for Ageing Better national campaign. We have done some work locally in East Lindsey, led by the TED programme. Most recently, we did the International Women's Day stories. Marco referred to the individual stories of older people. And so for International Women's Day, we have uploaded some stories of some of the older women that we work with, and we will be looking at stories throughout the year for older people. So keep an eye on that page on the TED website. One of the interesting things that came from the survey was, and bear in mind the survey was professionals and not older people in the community, was that respondents felt that on the whole, older people felt respected and included by the people in their community. However, the number dropped significantly when they were asked about people under 25 respecting older people in the community. So it might be worth doing some more work about what older people themselves think when we are engaging with older people to write our strategy and action plan. No, we need to go civic. I nearly got a next slide then. Civic participation and employment. So that's employment and training, but civic participation is also about whether or not you feel that you have a role in the political decisions locally. So it's parish councillors, town councillors, district councillors, those sorts of people. And what we focused on here is the Department of Work and Pensions Fuller Working Lives, but also the Age Friendly Futures project that will be run by YMCA Lincolnshire. What we found in the survey was that while only 19% of the respondents think there's enough training and employment opportunities for those 50 to 65, even less, so 13%, feel there's enough training and employment opportunities for people over 65. So generally speaking, as an area, we need to improve the opportunities that we have for people over 50 to train, to change employment, to improve their skills. Next slide, please, Becca. Okay, communication information. This has been a massive issue this year, as we all know, how we communicate the ever-changing information to the public. It's already been mentioned about, you know, the issues around accessing digital communication. We have found that a lot of people have been motivated to get online and also. Have I frozen? Someone's just asked, have I frozen?
No, you're okay at the moment, Jane, you're fine.
It's just Ivan, okay. Right, so the communication information, yeah, so what we focused on there were some of the things that can impact on people's communication and information ability. And finally, we'll go on to domain 8, which is community support and health services. This is probably by far the biggest domain and is impacted by all the other domains. So when we talk about healthy ageing, we are talking about all those domains, and we need to look at the intersection of all the other domains with this one. We focused on mental health services, which when we decided to were very important, but actually as the pandemic has gone on, the mental health impact on everybody has obviously become a talking point. So we need to look at the mental health impact on older people, and particularly those who are shielding and haven't been out much at all, if at all, for the last year. What we found was that the responses to the survey suggest the availability and accessibility to all hospital and wellbeing appointments is not equal across East Lindsey, and that a person's location has a huge impact on the availability and accessibility of health appointments. So that came across both in focus groups and in our professional survey. So that's something which I know is being looked at, but it's definitely something we need to think of. Okay, so next slide. So what we found is that the experience of older people in East Lindsey is not equal. The likelihood of them ageing well is dependent on the intersection of a number of factors. And what I will say is, while being a coastal rural area, we will have certain things that are unique to us. This is the findings really across the whole of the UK, that the experience of ageing does vary, dependent on a number of factors. So next slide, let's quickly focus on what's going well and what are the challenges. One of the challenges is my throat at the minute, but there you go. Okay, so what's going well? We live in an attractive rural and coastal landscape. Lots of large open spaces, lots of fresh air. Property prices are reasonable compared to the national averages, and that is really attractive for people wanting to retire to East Lindsey. Often they can retire from other parts of the country, buy something nice and have a little nest egg in the bank. There is a huge willingness by the local authority and other organisations to improve things for older people. This is evidenced by the East Lindsey District Council TED partnership, the creation of a portfolio holder for better ageing, Councillor William Gray, membership of the Centre for Ageing Better UK network, and also membership of their steering group on which I sit. There's also the Lincolnshire Rural Partnership, and Amy will speak about that in a little while. The recent COVID-19 crisis has encouraged older people to engage more fully with digital communication, and this has given some people the motivation to explore digital technology for the first time, while others have grown in confidence exploring a wider range of digital options, opening up more opportunities for people to feel informed and connected. And as Links Digital and Marco have both alluded to, there are people who've never engaged in social activities coming forward and engaging digitally. So that's a really positive thing. And then finally, what's going well is the Towns Fund, bringing enormous opportunities to create new and life-changing projects in the coastal communities. And in our baseline report, there is a focus on the campus future living. The challenges. Okay, so the majority of people report that the provision of public transport is not satisfactory. That's across the board. The limitations of the bus services due to the large rural area and the cost of running buses that are often not full mean that people are not able to easily access social activities, carry out essential tasks, attend health appointments, go for job interviews, go for jobs outside of their immediate location. There seems to be a lack of good, clear knowledge across professional agencies about the availability of housing and the provision of related services. And that includes the Disabled Facilities Grant, which makes a huge difference to some older people. Many older people live a distance from their extended family. For example, their children, their close friends may have moved away, or they have moved away from them, which can have implications for increased isolation, leading to increased risks to health as they age. And there's a lot of low-paid seasonal work in tourism and farming when they're allowed to work. Many people over 50 are unemployed or employed in insecure jobs with few prospects. Next slide, please, Becca. And this is my final slide, so we won't be long. Okay. So, the opportunity to change things. What this process is providing us with is a fantastic opportunity to make significant changes for people as they grow older in East Lindsey. We will create an age-friendly strategy and action plan developed through multi-agency engagement and engagement with older people, as we have been doing throughout the programme. Items for consideration for inclusion within the strategy might include increased awareness for professionals, for businesses and for the public, addressing the issue of ageism, improving our outdoor spaces, and improving people's health and well-being, focusing on the link between health and its connection to the other age-friendly domains, and having that integrated approach to health. We'll use something called the Decade of Healthy Aging, which I haven't talked about, but it's very easy to find information on the internet. But it's an initiative led by the World Health Organization and the United Nations. It's a 10-year initiative, and it provides an opportunity for governments, communities, and the private sector to improve the lives of older people. And we'll build on what's already going well and the initiatives that are in their early stages. So the Towns Fund, huge opportunities there to improve things for everybody, but you know, the older community are a big part of that coastal community. The Lincolnshire Rural Partnership between the Centre for Ageing Better, Lincolnshire County Council and East Lindsey District Council. The work of the TED Ageing Better programme, which obviously we've heard a huge amount about and just is going to provide such a foundation for all this work in the future. Developing the concept of age-friendly tourism with a particular focus on the Wolds area of outstanding natural beauty and the coastal towns. And finally, this has been mentioned before that I would speak about it, ageing without children. One of the things that we have recently become very aware of in TED is the issue of people ageing without children. And Patricia Folks came to us with this information, and I've been working with Trish and with my colleague Heather on this project. And what we're going to be doing is developing a support group for people ageing without children, trying to raise awareness of the issue locally, but also to engage with national organisation and the Centre for Ageing Better on what can be done. And we have a launch event planned for the 15th of April. So details of that are on the TED website and also on Eventbrite. So that's my bit of advertising. So I'll go back to what I said at the beginning to maybe just think about what you as an organisation or you as an individual might be able to do to improve things and to help make East Lindsey an age-friendly community. And the next speaker, I believe, is Michelle Howard.
Thank you, Jane. Yes, and I'd like to welcome Michelle Howard to talk a little bit about next steps for East Lindsey District Council. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. If we can just go on to the first slide, please. Okay, thank you. Before I start on this slide, actually, I just want to take a minute to reflect. So as a council and as a partner in East Lindsey, we are so proud to work with TED and the whole team. And by the whole team, I mean all of those delivery partners, the volunteers and everybody that really represents that programme. And actually to hear some of those voices today, a year on from the first lockdown, is quite poignant because of the impact that we know that the TED programme has had in our communities at a time when people actually might otherwise have not had any contact and been really, really isolated. And what we're starting to really see in East Lindsey is that sort of network of really trusted partners in our communities sort of working together, then creating those networks actually within our communities. And actually that's what it's about. If we're going to get that real social connectedness, we need to find ways to try and really sustain some of that in our communities. And TED is really empowering and enabling that, creating a bit of that ripple effect. So in terms of East Lindsey, that kind of takes me to say that actually as organisations, whoever we are on the call today, if we all look at our own corporate plans, our own corporate strategies, and we've all got them, all of those will have a common thread about people and communities and supporting people to live and age well. It might just be worded slightly differently. For East Lindsey, the real focus on ageing really is driven by that population profile. We know we've got an ageing population and we refuse to see it as a burden. We see it as a real opportunity and something to embrace. The work of the TED programme, the learning that we've had from the TED programme, and then the fact that we've been able to use that as such a catalyst for change and other things, and to change some of those conversations that we were having as an organisation has been really quite powerful. So in terms of some of the areas that we try to focus on as a council, One is around how can we best empower and support our communities, and Hayden's reflection earlier about doing with rather than to is a really important one. Making sure we properly understand needs and aspirations and preferences. And that's really important, actually. If we want to go about sort of putting in place a strategy or an action plan, let's really take the time to understand, you know, what's what in our communities. And that's the reason that we didn't make our application to the World Health Organization's sort of global network of age-friendly communities straight away, because we wanted to spend some time ensuring that we did understand and we were able to sort of really consider some of those challenges and barriers in our own communities before we tried to sort of seek any kind of accreditation for the work that we had ongoing. And then the third one that is really key, and this is where it's been really exciting to work with the TED programme and use the evidence base from TED, has been about maximising opportunities, but actually creating some of those opportunities to really embrace our ageing population, and helping people to prepare for later life, helping people to remain economically active or active in a way that's right for them, but changing the conversation. So 2 years ago, as an organisation, we wouldn't have been having the conversation about economic growth and better ageing, yet we've been able to really sort of feature that firmly within the town investment plan that Jane has referred to. So I'll show you some examples in a few minutes, but I just wanted to show you these extracts here. So these are from the East Lindsey corporate strategy. You don't need to read them, and the idea wasn't to bore you with the words, but I just want to show that as a council, we genuinely believe in supporting people to live and age well. And I think that's really important then in being able to support this wider programme, because it is embedded and we believe in it, and we genuinely believe in it. So it's firmly sitting within our corporate strategy. It's explicit within there as well. We have, as Jane said, the portfolio holder for better ageing. So we've got that political support, and that's been really positive and powerful for us to have. And then it's featured all the way through our delivery plans and our day-to-day delivery. And what we will be doing as we now get to sort of really rolling out a strategy around better ageing is making sure we embed that in all of our services and everything we do, so that we look at all of those things really through the lens of better ageing. As an area, we are, as I say, really proud to have a focus on better ageing. So a year ago, we proactively joined the UK network of age-friendly communities, and we've had this baseline assessment ongoing for the last year. And now the key for us is in what do we do with that? How do we really create some exciting opportunities as a result? But how do we actually articulate all the things that we're already doing that contribute to supporting people to live and age well? If you can go to the next slide, please. So I've deliberately just used images here, and I just want to talk you through some of them just to give you an idea of the kind of things that we do as a council that are linked directly to this agenda and are influenced directly by this agenda. So within our corporate strategy, you'll see there, so in the next few weeks, we will be going through the various decision-making processes to ask our members to give us the permission to apply to the World Health Organization global network for of age-friendly communities. And this really is about us being able to demonstrate this is important to us, and we want to really be positive about ageing, and we want to be part of the story about ageing as well. And we want to learn, we want to continuously learn and develop, because we know that things are always changing. We have embedded sort of a focus on better ageing and really meeting the needs of our communities within our COVID recovery plans, because this is a key part. If we want to support those who have been particularly impacted by the pandemic, we need to look across all sectors of our community, and there is no getting away from the fact that some of our older residents have been particularly impacted in a number of ways. The work of TED was a real catalyst, actually, leading to us looking to become part of the UK network of age-friendly communities, but then also was the catalyst for that conversation at a Lincolnshire level. Lincolnshire as a whole has an ageing population, and it led us to say, what could we do differently, and what could we really harness here to show how we can support people across 4 domains that Amy will talk about in a bit more detail in a few minutes. And so going through a process of being able to really demonstrate the breadth and the quality of things that are happening, not just in East Lindsey, but across Lincolnshire, led to Lincolnshire securing that partnership. And that's a 5-year partnership, and that's really significant actually, because it sits within the structures of the Health and Wellbeing Board and helps us at a very local level to give some visibility to the work and the impact of the TED programme as well. And actually it's really important, I think, for any of us as partners, where there's incredible work going on in our communities, quite often it's hidden, and it's, you know, the difference it makes to those people who benefit from it is huge. But our role really is to make sure we give that the visibility that it deserves and really sit it within those structures that it needs to as well. A couple of other things, I've just, you'll see the picture there with all the doors on. That is Lincolnshire's Homes for Independence blueprints, which is currently working its way through all of the local authorities and different organisations for endorsement. And really that's a call to action so that we can support people to access the accommodation that's right for their needs now and in the future, and that people can better prepare for later life. And as that is going through the process at East Lindsey, our focus is on our ageing population. How do we make sure that housing is fit for the future? And how do we make sure that everything we do from a wellbeing perspective, a housing perspective, a planning perspective can really support those aims and objectives? So those links back into the Health and Wellbeing Board are really, really key. The next one that's really, really exciting for me, and honestly, 2 years ago, we would not have had this conversation, is that we said, we know that health and wellbeing is a real challenge in some of our communities. We know that inequality is a massive challenge in some of our communities. And we know that we've got an ageing population. And we know that those things can be seen as a real negative when you think about economic growth and COVID recovery even. And we've shifted that conversation, and I've included the vision there for the Connected Coast Board, who have overseen the development of the town investment plans for Skegness and Mablethorpe, and they'll oversee the delivery of the various projects that have come from that. But to have the words in an economic sort of growth document that talk about being a place where positive ageing is such a focus, and where we turn some of those perceived weaknesses into nationally significant strengths, that's where there's some of the real excitement for me, because all of this work actually has a place in that as well. So you've heard a few things about the Campus for Future Living in today's presentations, and for us that is a massive opportunity for Mablethorpe, an area that we never thought we'd be able to bring something like this forward, but where we can say we know what those challenges are for people that are ageing in our communities, and we want to be able to try and prevent some of those things from escalating, and we want to have the right professionals and the right conversations and the right partners working together to do that. So it feels like, TED has been such a catalyst for change to us, and we're genuinely, really, really proud of that partnership and what we can do with that in the future. And to be perfectly honest, I think there are no limitations. We want to be as creative as we can and really embrace any of those opportunities, and to kind of hear the voices of people who benefit from things on the ground today makes it really real, and makes all of that for me feel so, so important. So that's all I'm going to say. Actually, I'm going to hand over to Amy to talk about the county-wide partnership, but I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that's presented today, because it's been really, really nice to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, if we could hand over to Amy, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you everybody for including me today. It's been an absolutely fantastic event, and it's been lovely to hear about everything that TED has been doing alongside the TED partners. So I've been asked to join you today because I've recently joined the Centre for Ageing Better as the Lincolnshire Strategic Partnership, and I'm going to give you a very quick introduction both to the work of Ageing Better but also to the partnership itself. Could we have the next slide, please, Becca? Thank you. The UK's population is undergoing a massive age shift, and we've heard a lot about that today. In less than 20 years, 1 in 4 people will be aged over 65. And whilst the fact that many of us are living longer is an absolutely fantastic achievement, unless radical action is taken by government, businesses and others in society, millions of us risk missing out enjoying those later years. At the Centre of Ageing Better, we want everybody to enjoy later life. We create change in policy and practice informed by evidence, and we work with partners across England to improve employment, housing, health and communities. We're a charitable foundation set up in 2015, and we're funded by the National Lottery Community Fund by an endowment. We're also part of the Government What Works network. Can I have the next slide, please, Becca? Thank you. By 2040, we want more people in later life to be in good health, financially secure, to have social connections and feel that their lives are meaningful and purposeful. To achieve real and significant impact in these areas, we focus on where we can make the biggest difference, and that's those people who are approaching later life. So we generally work with people aged over 50. Our aims are for people approaching later life to live healthier, more active lives, to be in good quality, fulfilling work for longer, to live in safe, accessible and adaptable homes, and to live in communities where relationships flourish. We also work to support local areas to take a strategic approach in becoming age-friendly. And I know you've heard a lot about age-friendly from Jane today. To refresh age-friendly communities are places where people of all ages can live healthy and active lives. These places make it possible for people to continue to stay in their homes, to participate in the activities that they value, to contribute to their communities for as long as possible. We also work in places. We work in local strategic partnerships in Leeds, Greater Manchester, and now in Lincolnshire. And we do this to adopt a joined-up strategic approach to ageing, to apply what works across our priority areas, and to learn from local implementation about how to scale and spread. Where we don't know what works, we test and we innovate. We generate and share learning locally, regionally, and nationally. And we learn to expand our reach and impact. Could I have the next slide, please, Becca? Thank you. Lincolnshire, like the rest of the UK, is undergoing a massive age shift. Lincolnshire is one of many rural and coastal areas which already reflects the kind of demographics we expect to see nationally in 2080, with 43.4% of the population already aged over 50 and 27% of people aged between 50 and 69. In August of this year, Lincolnshire County Council signed an MOU with Ageing Better alongside East Lindsey District Council to establish a 5-year strategic partnership to collaborate on a number of joint projects. We will work together to coordinate a strategic response to the opportunities and challenges of an ageing population in Lincolnshire, raising ageing as a strategic priority and taking joint action to improve later lives. Work will focus on the areas that we know will make a transformational difference to people's lives, including employment, homes, communities, and health. And you will see that I've set out some of the areas where we will start working on this slide. We're also going to work towards Lincolnshire becoming an age-friendly county, picking up from the work that East Lindsey have been doing with Jane and actually speaking to the other districts and spreading the legacy and the learning from TED and from age-friendly East Lindsey across the county. We want Lincolnshire to be an age-friendly county where people of all backgrounds are able to actively participate and are treated with respect regardless of their age. The pandemic has caused a delay in the launch of the partnership, as I know it's caused all sorts of havoc for all of the speakers today, but it has given us a new lens to view ageing through. The impacts of the pandemic are yet to be fully understood in relation to better ageing, and we know that they will bring proportionately disproportionate impacts in Lincolnshire's rural context. Ageing Better's research recognises that the overwhelming picture for those in mid to later life appears to be one of acceleration and of widening inequalities, particularly for those who were already at risk of missing out on a good later life. Existing risks and poor outcomes have been heightened by COVID-19 in terms of employment and financial security, physical and mental well-being, time spent in non-decent homes and the resilience of local communities and infrastructure, while social isolation has been exacerbated by continued social distancing. However, there also exists opportunities for innovation, for example, through more widespread use of digital solutions, through increased community spirit and through influencing COVID recovery planning with a view to supporting the needs of residents in mid to later life. We are really excited to be getting the work of the partnership underway now and to be able to support the positive changes that we collectively aspire to for Lincolnshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And wow, what an amazing group of speakers that we've had throughout this whole event. I know that some of the TED team have been collating some questions, and I believe that some of those questions have been answered within the chat, but I just want to check in and make sure that there are any other questions that might not have been answered. So I'm just wondering if any of the TED team have got anything within chat that they want to ask the question.
Yes, could we ask Jane Burney, how do we balance the peaceful benefits of rural and coastal communities? And you mentioned we provide public transport. Are there any comments or best practice models?
Thank you. What I would first say is I'm not an expert on public transport. I think that there's a lot of discussion. I've been to various events about different models that are being used. There's community transport models that are being used. There's information on the Rural Services Network website. And I'm now going to ask Amy or Ivan if they have any really good examples of models that are used in rural communities where people have succeeded in keeping that lovely rural environment, but also having the public transport and community transport available for people. I think it's something we need to explore further.
Well, if I could offer a reflection, Jane, there's a brilliant rural community transport planning toolkit that's run not a million miles away from Lincolnshire, in East Riding of Yorkshire Council, that moves away from people being stressed about the removal of a particular service or the challenge of getting to a particular place in traditional means, and recasts people's travel needs. So it starts with a really insightful, and we've heard a lot about co-design, participative process of getting people to talk about what their transport needs is, and then it provides a structured means of them engaging with new approaches to it. And the council spend quite a significant amount of budget on that, because it's delivered in places, particularly in the deeper rural bits of East Riding, getting out towards their coast around Bridlington and then north of Beverley. It's delivered some really beneficial enhanced transport routes and opportunities for people that responds directly to their needs, rather than just is, as quite often public transport is, fixated on buses. So that's one really good example, and I can share some more information if people are interested after today.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Jane. Michelle has had to leave to go to another meeting, so if there is anything supplementary that she can add, then I will instigate that with Michelle. Okay. Jane, is there anything else that you would like to add, Jane Burney?
I noticed Amy's put some information in the chat as well about transport.
Super, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm right in thinking that there are no further questions because they've all been answered in chat. So it leaves me to really kind of wrap up this amazing event. I'm speechless and I work in the TED programme. We hope that you have found this event useful and informative. I think I want to just give a really big thank you to all those involved in the event, in particular the speakers who have devoted their time to put together presentations and spend some time in the planning and organisation of this event, which for those of you who've organised events know that it does take a while. But I also want to give a particular mention to those behind the scenes. So we've had the TED team managing all the various chat functions, and in particular to Becca, who's been the next slide, please. She's been the host of the presentations. So a big thank you from me to everybody that's been involved. So I suppose in this 7th year of the TED programme in East Lindsey, it has been great today to be able to share and reflect on the learnings, challenges and opportunities of all those involved in the work we have done and will continue to do in the next 12 months. We know that people are living longer, and TED has been given the opportunity to see what works through Test and Learn to support the over 50s in East Lindsey. It is valuable to support an ageing population, and the past year has shown the true importance in the value of connectedness. The TED programme had to be adaptable, flexible and responsive to COVID-19 as we all face the pandemic. Communities and businesses came together to overcome those challenges. We are continuing to support those over 50s in East Lindsey, and even more so with the roadmap coming out of lockdown. We do know that it may take time for individuals and communities to feel comfortable to engage or re-engage with face-to-face activities. If you do want to find out more of the work that we've not been able to cover in today's event, then please do visit our website, tedineastlindsey.co.uk, or contact us, ted@linksymca.co.uk. And finally, from me, please do provide us with any feedback. And if you would like to share the event, we can send you the YouTube link of the event that's happened. Thank you so much for your time.